Hello lovelies, in this video we're going through your Edexcel International GCSE History, Paper 1 option, Germany, the development of dictatorship. Now, if you want the free notes to go along with this video, they're all available for you to download on the website. Then you can annotate as you're going along. There are also free questions and free flashcards, all available for you. If you want our predictive paper for this year, we're going to go through the questions that we think are most likely to come up and then show you how to interpret the questions and walk you through how to structure an essay to really show to the examiners everything that you know.
GCSE History, Germany, the First World War. In this video we are looking at life on the home front, abdication, surrender and revolution, and the political, economic and social impact of the war. Life on the home front. Life in Germany during the First World War was difficult and became increasingly harsh as the conflict dragged on. When the war first started in 1914, it was very popular among the German people. There was a strong belief that the war would be over quickly and that Germany would achieve a swift victory. However, this optimism quickly faded as the German army became bogged down in a stalemate on the Western Front. Instead of a quick victory, the war turned into a prolonged and grueling conflict. One of the main hardships faced by the German people was the British naval blockade of German ports. This blockade led to severe shortages of food, medicines and clothing, causing widespread suffering. By 1915, war weariness had set in among the German population. Evidence of this can be seen in the protests that occurred during the war. For example, in 1915, 500 women protested in front of the Parliament buildings, demanding that their men be brought back from the trenches. In 1916, 10,000 workers gathered in Berlin to demand an end to the war and a change in government policies. By 1918, Germany was on the brink of collapse. The people were struggling to survive on a diet of turnips and bread. Additionally, a deadly flu epidemic was sweeping through the country, adding to the misery and despair. The combination of food shortages, the ongoing war, and the flu epidemic made life extremely difficult for the German people during this time. Grade 9 knowledge. The course of the First World War. In 1914, Germany had a plan known as the Schlieffen Plan, which aimed for a quick victory by swiftly defeating France in the west before turning to fight Russia in the east. This plan required a rapid invasion through Belgium to encircle and capture Paris. However, this plan failed for several reasons. Firstly, the Belgians put up a strong resistance, slowing down the German advance. Secondly, Britain entered the war to defend Belgium, further complicating Germany's efforts. And thirdly, in September 1914, the German advance was halted at the Battle of the Marne by French and British forces, leading to a stalemate and the establishment of trench warfare on the Western Front. With the failure of the Schlieffen Plan, Germany found itself fighting a war on two fronts: the Western Front against France, Britain, and later the United States, and the Eastern Front against Russia. This stretched German resources and manpower thin. Additionally, the Allies imposed a naval blockade on Germany, severely restricting the import of food, raw materials, and military supplies. In April 1917, the United States entered the war on the side of the Allies, providing a significant boost in manpower and resources. However, there was a brief period where the situation seemed to improve for Germany. Following the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, the new communist government sought peace. In March 1918, Russia signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany, surrendering vast territories to the Germans and allowing Germany to concentrate its forces on the Western Front. In the spring of 1918, General Ludendorff launched a massive offensive on the Western Front, hoping to break the Allied lines before American forces could fully arrive. This offensive, known as the Ludendorff Offensive or the Spring Offensive, initially achieved significant gains and nearly broke through Allied defences. However, the arrival of over 2 million fresh American troops and the resilience of the Allied forces halted the German advance. By August 1918, it was clear that the tide had turned against Germany, with Germany's allies, including Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, facing collapse and seeking peace. German military situation deteriorated. German troops began a gradual retreat. The situation at home was equally dire, with widespread discontent and unrest among the population. By late 1918, the possibility of revolution was very real, and the German government was under immense pressure. Abdication, surrender, and revolution. In 1918, a series of events led to Germany's surrender in the First World War. In October 1918, Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff informed politicians that Germany could not win the war. The Allied powers, Britain, France, and the USA, demanded the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II. However, the Kaiser refused to abdicate and instead allowed the main political parties to form a new government, transferring some of his powers to the Reichstag. This move did little to satisfy the German people, who were increasingly demonstrating against the war, with some even demanding the overthrow of the Kaiser. On the 28th of October 1918, a significant event occurred when German sailors stationed at Kiel were ordered out to sea to attack British ships. The sailors refused to follow the orders, leading to a mutiny. News of the mutiny spread quickly, and sailors in other ports also began to refuse orders, receiving support from workers. Soldiers sent to suppress the protests joined in as well. Towns were taken over by these groups, and they established special councils to run them. Within just 6 days, workers' and soldiers' councils were governing cities all over Germany, including Hamburg and Munich. This widespread unrest and the establishment of these councils demonstrated that the existing government was losing control. The situation was so dire that even the army generals no longer supported Kaiser Wilhelm II. Faced with no other option, the Kaiser abdicated the throne on the 9th of November 1918 and went into exile in Holland, where he remained for the rest of his life. On the 10th of November 1918, Friedrich Ebert, the leader of the Social Democratic Party, the largest political party in Germany, temporarily took the Kaiser's place. Ebert and the Council of People's Representatives took control of the government. One of Ebert's first actions was to seek an end to the war. Matthias Erzberger, representing the new German government, signed an armistice with the Allied powers on the 11th of November 1918. This agreement marked Germany's surrender and the end of the First World War. The impact of the First World War. The First World War had a profound impact on Germany, affecting the country economically, socially, and politically. Economic impact. The war left Germany heavily in debt, particularly to the USA. The government debt tripled between 1914 and 1918, rising from 50 billion to 150 billion marks. There were also significant human costs, around 600,000 war widows and 2 million children without fathers. The pensions for these families would be extremely costly. Furthermore, German factories were exhausted by the war. They had focused on producing weapons and arms, leaving them with few goods to sell abroad and generate income. This severely hampered Germany's post-war economy. Social impact. The war caused deep divisions within German society. Some factory owners made huge fortunes during the war, while workers faced wage restrictions. Women had taken on roles in factories, which some people saw as damaging to traditional family values. The human cost of the war was staggering. An estimated 1.8 million soldiers were killed, and another 1 million were either prisoners of war or missing. Additionally, 4 million soldiers were injured. On the home front, 750,000 civilians died due to starvation and disease, further highlighting the severe social strain caused by the war. Political impact. Politically, Germany was left unstable by the war. A mutiny and subsequent revolution had led to significant upheaval. Some members of the armed forces believed that Germany had been close to victory and that the surrender was unnecessary. They felt betrayed by the politicians who signed the armistice, labelling them as the November criminals. This belief that Germany had been betrayed from within became known as the stab in the back theory. This sense of betrayal and the resulting political instability would have lasting effects on Germany, contributing to the turbulent years that followed. In summary, at the start of the First World War, Germans were optimistic, believing in a quick victory. However, as the war dragged on, public support waned, and by 1915, protests against the war began. The British naval blockade caused severe shortages, leading to widespread suffering and starvation by 1918. By late 1918, protests and mutinies forced Kaiser Wilhelm II to abdicate, leading to the establishment of a new government under Friedrich Ebert. The war left Germany heavily in debt and its economy in ruins, with factories exhausted and massive social divisions. The war's end led to political turmoil, with the stab-in-the-back myth fueling long-term unrest. Germany's surrender on the 11th of November 1918 marked the end of the war, but the war's impact left the country deeply troubled. The formation of the Weimar Republic. In this video, we are looking at the establishment of a new government and the Weimar Constitution, including its strengths and weaknesses. Setting up a new government. The Weimar Republic was formed during a crucial period in German history, from November 1918 to July 1919. This new government emerged following the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II and Germany's defeat in the First World War. Friedrich Ebert, the leader of the Social Democratic Party, played a key role in establishing the republic. To ensure the stability and support for the new government, Ebert reached out to various groups in society. Civil servants. Ebert promised that civil servants who had served under the Kaiser would remain in their positions. This decision helped ensure that essential public services, such as tax collection, continued to function smoothly. The army. No significant changes were made to the army. Officers who had served under the Kaiser kept their posts, which helped maintain the army's loyalty and ensured that it would support the new government. Industrialists. Ebert assured industrialists that there would be no nationalisation or confiscation of land. This reassurance was vital for keeping the economy stable and maintaining industrial production. Trade unions. To gain the support of workers and trade unions, Ebert promised to work towards achieving an 8-hour working day. This promise helped to secure the backing of the working class. Despite these efforts, the new republic faced significant challenges and unrest. Many senior figures, such as army leaders and judges, were sceptical or outright opposed to the republic. Some Germans wanted the return of the Kaiser, while others, inspired by the Russian Revolution of 1917, desired a communist revolution to overthrow the industrialists and ruling classes. On the 19th of January 1919, elections were held to elect a National Assembly, with a high voter turnout of 82%. Moderate parties performed well in these elections. The SPD gained 40% of the vote, and the Centre Party received 20%. Due to the unrest in Berlin, the National Assembly met for the first time in February 1919 in the town of Weimar, located 250 kilometres away from Berlin. This is how the new government came to be known as the Weimar Republic. The formation of the Weimar Republic marked the beginning of a new democratic era in Germany, although it faced numerous difficulties and opposition from various groups within the country. Key individual. Friedrich Ebert. Early life and career. Ebert was born on the 4th of February 1871 in Heidelberg, Germany. He grew up in a working-class family and initially trained and worked as a saddler. Despite his modest beginnings, Ebert was passionate about improving the lives of ordinary workers and became involved in politics, joining the Social Democratic Party of Germany. Rise in politics. Ebert's hard work and leadership skills helped him quickly rise through the ranks of the SPD. By 1913, he had become one of the party's key leaders. He was dedicated to fighting for workers' rights and social reforms, which made him a popular figure among the working class. Chancellor and President. In the tumultuous days of November 1918, Ebert was appointed Chancellor of Germany. He played a crucial role in the transition from a monarchy to a republic. In February 1919, he was elected as the first president of the newly established Weimar Republic, a position he held until his death. Personal tragedy. The First World War brought great personal sorrow to Ebert, as he lost 2 of his sons during the conflict. Despite this, he remained dedicated to his country. In December 1918, he addressed the returning German soldiers, telling them, "Your sacrifice and deeds are without parallel. No enemy defeated you." His statement was meant to boost the morale of the soldiers and the nation. Challenges in leadership. Ebert tried to gain the support of both the workers and the wealthy to stabilise the country. However, this approach made him unpopular with both the far left who wanted more radical changes, and the far right, who wanted a return to a more conservative and authoritarian government. Socialist beliefs and working class background also meant that many conservative and nationalistic Germans never fully accepted him as their leader. Death and legacy. Herbert died from a heart attack on the 28th of February 1925. His time as president was a crucial period in German history. Despite facing significant opposition, he is remembered for his commitment to democracy and his efforts to guide Germany through a time of profound change and instability. The Constitution. Weimar Constitution was created by the National Assembly, whose purpose was to draft a new governing framework for Germany after the First World War. The Constitution was agreed upon on the 31st of July 1919 by a vote of 262 to 75. The Constitution aimed to create a democratic and fair government structure, ensuring various freedoms and rights for the citizens, while balancing the power between different branches of the government. Its key features were the electorate. The electorate were the people of Germany. All men and women aged 21 and over were allowed to vote. They elected the Reichstag, or the Parliament, and the President. Under the Weimar Constitution, the people of Germany were guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and equality under the law. The President. The President was the head of state. He was elected by the people every 7 years. While he did not engage in day-to-day politics, he had significant powers, including choosing the Chancellor and controlling the Army, Navy, and Air Force. Under Article 48, the President had the authority to pass laws in an emergency without needing the Reichstag's approval. The Chancellor. The Chancellor acted as the Prime Minister and was the head of government. He was responsible for the day-to-day running of the government and choosing ministers. The Cabinet. The Cabinet consisted of the most important ministers who worked with the Chancellor, assisting him in making decisions. Parliament. Parliament was made up of two houses, the Reichstag and the Reichsrat. The Reichstag was the more powerful of the two houses, controlling taxation. Members were elected by the people at least every 4 years, using a system of proportional representation. The Reichsrat represented the different regions of Germany, with each of the 18 regions sending representatives based on its size. Its members were elected every 4 years. Strengths and weaknesses. The Weimar Constitution had several strengths and weaknesses, making it one of the most democratic constitutions of its time, but also prone to significant challenges. Strengths. Democratic nature. Voting rights. All men and women over the age of 21 could vote, which was very progressive for that period. Proportional representation. This system meant that even smaller parties could gain seats in the Reichstag. For example, if a party received 20% of the vote, it would get 20% of the seats. This allowed for a more diverse range of opinions to be represented. Checks and balances. Distribution of power. The President had significant powers, such as appointing and dismissing the Chancellor, dismissing the Reichstag, and controlling the army. However, the electorate could change the President every 7 years. The Chancellor's role. The Chancellor could propose laws, but they needed the majority support in the Reichstag to pass. Regional power. Regions retained a degree of autonomy through their own parliaments, known as Länder, which controlled local public services like the police, courts, and schools. Weaknesses. Article 48. Presidential powers. In times of crisis, Article 48 allowed the President to pass laws by decree without the Reichstag's approval. This provision was intended for emergencies, but was often relied upon, undermining the democratic process and giving the President excessive power. Coalition governments. A fragmented Reichstag. Proportional representation led to many small parties winning seats, often resulting in no single party having an overall majority. This meant that parties had to form coalitions, which required compromising and made strong decision-making difficult. Extremist parties. This system also allowed extremist parties to gain representation. Between 1919 and 1923, there were 9 different coalition governments, indicating instability and frequent changes in leadership. In summary, the Weimar Republic was established after Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated following Germany's defeat in the First World War. Friedrich Ebert, leader of the Social Democratic Party, played a crucial role in setting up the new government, becoming the first president of the Weimar Republic. Ebert secured support from civil servants, the army, industrialists and trade unions to maintain stability in the new republic. The republic faced challenges from both monarchists and communists, creating a tense political environment. The Weimar Constitution introduced democratic voting rights, a powerful president with emergency powers under Article 48, and a proportional representation system in the Reichstag. The Constitution promoted democracy, but led to unstable coalition governments and concentrated power in the president during crises. Post-war problems, 1919 to 1923. In this video, we are looking at the early unpopularity of the Republic, the Treaty of Versailles, and the French occupation of the Ruhr and the hyperinflation crisis. Early unpopularity of the Republic. The Weimar Republic faced significant unpopularity from the very beginning for several reasons. One of the main issues was the association of its leaders with Germany's surrender in the First World War and the signing of the armistice in November 1918. These politicians were derogatorily called the November criminals because many Germans felt betrayed, believing that the country could have continued fighting and potentially won the war. As the new leaders of the Weimar Republic, these same politicians were responsible for negotiating and signing the Treaty of Versailles in June 1919. The treaty imposed harsh terms on Germany, including severe territorial losses, disarmament, and hefty reparations payments. Many Germans viewed the treaty as a humiliation and a continuation of the betrayal they felt from the armistice. The Republic's association with this unpopular treaty made its leaders targets of public resentment and anger. The Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on the 28th of June 1919, and it imposed harsh terms on Germany following its defeat in the First World War. The key terms were reparations. Germany had to pay reparations to the Allies as compensation for the damage caused during the war. These reparations could be paid in goods as well as gold. In 1921, the total reparations were set at £6.6 billion, to be paid in yearly instalments over the next 66 years. War guilt clause. Germany was forced to accept full blame for starting the war. This clause was known as Article 231. Loss of overseas territories. Germany lost all its overseas colonies. These territories were handed over to the victorious countries to be administered as mandates. Military restrictions. The German army was limited to 100,000 men. The navy was restricted to 6 battleships, 6 cruisers, 12 destroyers and 12 torpedo boats. Submarines and an air force were completely prohibited. The Rhineland, a region on the border with France, was to be demilitarised. This meant that no German military forces or fortifications were allowed in this area. Territorial losses in Europe. Germany lost 13% of its land in Europe and 10% of its population. The treaty also stripped Germany of nearly 50% of its iron and 15% of its coal reserves. Alsace and Lorraine, regions taken by Germany after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870–71, were returned to France. Eupen and Malmedy were given to Belgium. Posen and West Prussia were handed over to Poland, creating what was known as the Polish Corridor, which divided Germany into 2 separate parts. German reaction. The Treaty of Versailles was extremely unpopular in Germany for several reasons, leading to widespread resentment and anger among the German population. Dictated peace, or diktat. Many Germans saw the treaty as a diktat, meaning it was a dictated peace. They felt it was imposed upon them without any negotiation or input from Germany. Germans had been under the assumption that they would be involved in the peace negotiations, but this was not the case. War guilt clause. Germans did not agree with this clause, as they did not believe that Germany should take full responsibility for the war. They felt that other countries were also to blame. Economic impact. There was significant alarm about the treaty's impact on the German economy. Germany already had huge war debts from the First World War, and now they were faced with paying enormous reparations. The treaty also resulted in the loss of people, factories, farms, and raw materials, which further weakened Germany's economy. The loss of valuable industrial regions and raw materials, like coal and iron, made it even harder for Germany to recover economically. No choice but to sign. The German government felt they had no choice but to sign the treaty. If they refused, the Allies threatened to restart the war, and Germany was in no position to continue fighting. However, many Germans did not see it this way and believed that their politicians had stabbed Germany in the back by agreeing to the treaty. These factors contributed to the early unpopularity of the Weimar Republic, as the new government was associated with the humiliating terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Grade 9 knowledge: expectation versus reality. When the First World War ended, Germans had certain expectations about the peace treaty that would follow. A key reason for their hope of a lenient peace was the influence of Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States. In January 1918, Wilson published his 14 points, which outlined his vision for a fair and lasting peace. Germans believed that the Treaty of Versailles would be based on these points. Some of Wilson's key ideas included freedom of the seas and free trade, ensuring that all nations could navigate the seas freely and engage in international trade without restrictions. National self-determination, allowing people to choose their own government and form their own nations based on shared identity and interests. Dismantling European empires, breaking up large empires to allow smaller nations to emerge and govern themselves. And the League of Nations, an international organisation to resolve disputes between countries and prevent future conflicts. However, Wilson's ideas were not fully embraced by the other Allied leaders. There were conflicting aims amongst them. Georges Clemenceau of France. The French Prime Minister was determined to make Germany pay for the massive devastation caused to France during the war. Clemenceau wanted to ensure that Germany could never again threaten European peace. David Lloyd George of Britain. The British Prime Minister had mixed feelings. While he did not want to punish Germany too harshly and create long-term resentment, he also had to respond to British public opinion, which demanded that Germany be held accountable and pay for the war. The result of these conflicting aims was that the Treaty of Versailles ended up being a compromise that did not fully satisfy any of the parties involved. Germans felt betrayed because the treaty was much harsher than they had anticipated based on Wilson's 14 points. French occupation of the Ruhr. The reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles contributed to significant economic strain on Germany. By 1922, Germany could no longer afford to pay these reparations, leading to the French occupation of the Ruhr in January 1923. This occupation, coupled with the German government's response of printing money to support striking workers, triggered a period of hyperinflation. The year 1923 became a year of crisis for the Weimar Republic, as it struggled to cope with the severe economic and social consequences of these events. The French and Belgian governments, who were among the countries most damaged by the First World War, did not believe Germany's claim that it couldn't pay. In January 1923, they decided to take action by invading the Ruhr, an important industrial region in Germany that was the centre of the country's iron, steel and coal production. About 60,000 French and Belgian troops moved into the Ruhr and took control of factories, mines and railways to compensate for the unpaid reparations. The German government ordered the workers in the Ruhr to go on strike as a form of passive resistance to the occupation. This meant that the workers stopped working, effectively halting industrial production in the region. To support the striking workers, the German government started printing more money to pay their wages. This led to a severe economic crisis known as hyperinflation. As the government printed more money, workers spent it quickly. Shopkeepers, seeing the increased demand and the devaluing currency, raised their prices. This caused the government to print even more money, which only made prices rise faster. The situation spiraled out of control, with prices rising so quickly that people had to spend their money as soon as they received it, knowing it would be worth less within hours. Hyperinflation crisis. The hyperinflation crisis in Germany in 1923 had several significant causes. Since 1919, the German government had been printing money to help pay off its debts, a situation worsened by the reparations payments required by the Treaty of Versailles. The currency at that time was linked to gold, but Germany did not have enough gold to back its money, causing the value of the currency to drop and prices to rise. The situation deteriorated further in January 1923, when the German government encouraged workers in the Ruhr to go on strike and printed even more money to pay the striking workers. This additional influx of money into the economy further devalued the currency, leading to hyperinflation. The effects of hyperinflation were dramatic and widespread. The price of everyday items such as bread skyrocketed. In 1918, bread cost 0.8 marks. By 1921, it was 4 marks. By 1922, it had risen to 163 marks. The rapid escalation continued in 1923, with bread costing 250 marks in January, 3,456 marks in July, 1,512,000 marks in September, and an astronomical 201 billion marks by November. Prices changed so rapidly that by the time people joined a queue and reached the front, the cost of goods had increased significantly. Money became so worthless that people needed wheelbarrows to carry enough to buy basic items. In many cases, people found alternative uses for the money. It was used to start fires, and children played with the money by making kites or using it as building blocks. Hyperinflation affected different groups in various ways. Those with savings saw their money lose all value, and people on fixed incomes, such as pensioners, struggled to keep up with the rising prices. Small businesses often collapsed due to the disruption of normal trade, and the middle classes were particularly hard hit as their financial security was destroyed. On the other hand, some people benefited from the crisis. Borrowers found it easy to pay off debts with devalued currency, and farmers could sell their produce at higher prices, taking advantage of the rising cost of food. The Weimar government was widely blamed for the hyperinflation crisis. Their decision to print more money to pay off debts and reparations, coupled with their response to the occupation of the Ruhr, were seen as major factors leading to the economic catastrophe. The hyperinflation of 1923 highlighted the severe instability and challenges faced by the Weimar Republic, contributing to the already widespread dissatisfaction and political unrest. In summary, the Weimar Republic was unpopular from the start, with its leaders labelled November criminals for signing the armistice and Treaty of Versailles, which many Germans saw as a betrayal. The Treaty of Versailles imposed reparations of £6.6 billion, territorial losses, military restrictions, and forced Germany to accept full blame for the war, leading to widespread resentment. Many Germans saw the treaty as a diktat, or dictated peace, and unfair. In 1923, France occupied the Ruhr region to enforce reparations, leading to strikes and the German government printing money to support workers, worsening the economic crisis. Hyperinflation spiralled out of control in 1923, with prices skyrocketing, causing money to lose value and severe hardship for many Germans, particularly the middle class and pensioners. The Weimar government was blamed for hyperinflation, causing further instability and fueling political unrest. Political unrest, 1919 to 23. In this video, we are looking at the challenges to the Weimar Republic from left and right, and political violence in Germany. In the elections for the National Assembly in January 1919, moderate parties received 80% of the vote. However, the Weimar Republic faced significant challenges from extremist left-wing and right-wing groups. The system of proportional representation allowed these extremist parties to gain seats in the Reichstag and attack the moderate coalitions that governed throughout the 1920s. The political parties of the Weimar Republic included, on the extreme left wing, the Communist Party of Germany, or the KPD. The KPD was opposed to the Republic and supported by industrial workers and some intellectuals. It aimed to create a socialist state and end capitalism, and was prepared to use revolution to achieve its goals. Moderate parties included the Social Democratic Party of Germany, or the SPD, that favoured the Republic. It was supported by the working class and trade unions. Its policies were to support democracy, social welfare programmes, and workers' rights. The German Democratic Party, or the DDP, also favoured the Republic. It was supported by the middle class and intellectuals. It aimed to support democracy, liberal ideas, social reforms, civil rights, and economic stability in Germany. The Centre Party, or Centrum, also favoured the Republic. It was supported by Catholics in rural areas in Germany. It supported democracy and wanted to protect Catholic interests, as well as promoting social welfare and traditional values. The German People's Party, or the DVP, initially supported the Republic and democracy, but later came to oppose it. It was backed by people with business interests and the middle classes. Its policies were pro-business, and it had conservative values. On the extreme right wing were the German National People's Party, the DNVP. They strongly opposed the Republic. They were supported by conservatives, monarchists, and nationalists. Policies included bringing back the monarchy, and they promoted nationalistic and conservative values. Finally, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the NSDAP, or the Nazi Party for short. They were strongly opposed to the Republic, supported by unemployed ex-soldiers, lower middle classes, and nationalists. Policies included total control by the state and the expansion of German territory. The Nazis were anti-Jewish and anti-communist. Challenges from left and right. Left wing. Goals. Left-wing groups, such as the Communist Party of Germany, wanted to end capitalism and abolish private ownership of land, property, and resources. They believed the country should be run for the benefit of the workers, with an international outlook and a focus on equality. Actions. They organised strikes, protests, and even uprisings to challenge the Weimar government. They wanted a socialist state and were inspired by the Russian Revolution of 1917. Right-wing. Goals. Right-wing groups like the National Socialist German Workers' Party wanted a return to a strong government headed by a powerful leader. They supported capitalism and traditional values, believing that the interests of the nation were more important than individual rights. They aimed to make Germany great again, with a large empire. Actions. They used propaganda, violence, and political manoeuvres to undermine the Weimar government. They blamed the Republic for Germany's problems and sought to replace it with a more authoritarian regime. The Spartacist Uprising of 1919. The Spartacist Uprising was a significant event in the early years of the Weimar Republic, involving a left-wing communist group called the Spartacus League. The Spartacus League was led by Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, two well-known communists. The group was named after Spartacus, a Roman gladiator who led a famous slave revolt. On the 6th of January 1919, the Spartacus League attempted to take over Berlin. Over 100,000 workers joined the uprising, taking to the streets in protest. The rebels managed to seize important buildings, including the government's newspaper and telegraph offices, hoping to spread their message and gain control of communication in the city. The Weimar government, in a difficult position due to the weakness of the regular army, called in 2,000 ex-soldiers, known as the Freikorps, to help suppress the uprising. The Freikorps were former soldiers who had been demobilised after the First World War and were now acting as a paramilitary force. By the 13th of January 1919, the Freikorps had driven the rebels from the streets, effectively crushing the uprising. On the 16th of January 1919, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht were arrested by the Freikorps. Shortly after their arrest, they were murdered, dealing a significant blow to the Spartacus movement. Grade 9 knowledge. The fear of communism and the threat from the left. At the end of the First World War, many European countries were gripped by a fear of communism. This fear stemmed from the 1917 Russian Revolution, during which Russia became the world's first communist country. The revolution led to the brutal murder of the Russian royal family and saw the communists, known as Bolsheviks, seizing land from landowners and redistributing it to peasants. They also nationalised banks and industries, placing them under state control. The impact of the Russian Revolution was profound and widespread. In response, countries like Britain and France sent soldiers to Russia to fight against the communists, hoping to prevent the spread of communism to their own nations. In Germany, the fear of communism was particularly strong, especially among the upper classes. The German Communist Party, the KPD, was seen as a direct threat to the existing social order. Many Germans were alarmed by the prospect of a similar revolution occurring in their own country, leading to the loss of their property and social status. The fear was heightened by the fact that the KPD was backed by the Soviet Union, which provided significant financial support. This well-funded party had the potential to mobilise and organise effectively, increasing the anxiety among those who opposed communism. In the spring of 1919, Germany's industrial regions, including the Ruhr mines, central Germany and Berlin, were hit by a wave of strikes and unrest. The striking workers had several demands: shorter working hours, the socialisation of industry, and a government based on worker councils. Inspired by the Russian Revolution, they wanted a political system where workers' councils, known as Soviets, had significant power. However, despite the widespread strikes, the protests lacked clear leadership and a coordinated strategy, making it difficult for the movement to gain enough momentum and widespread support to achieve its goals. The German government responded to the unrest with a combination of military force and strategic promises that they would address some of the workers' demands to calm the situation. In Bavaria, left-wing revolutionaries managed to take control and proclaimed a Bavarian Soviet Republic in March 1919. However, this revolutionary movement was short-lived. The Freikorps brutally suppressed the uprising, resulting in around 700 deaths. The defeat of the Bavarian Soviet Republic marked a significant setback for the left wing. By the summer of 1919, the immediate threat from communist and other left-wing groups had significantly weakened. Although the large-scale uprisings were quelled, numerous strikes and demonstrations continued throughout the country. While these smaller protests indicated ongoing discontent, they lacked the strength to pose a serious challenge to the government. The Freikorps. The Freikorps were groups of ex-soldiers who had recently returned from the First World War. These men had kept their weapons and formed private armies. They hated communists and partly blamed them for Germany's defeat in the war. By March 1919, it was estimated that the Freikorps numbered around 250,000 men. The Freikorps played a significant role in crushing communist uprisings in Germany during 1919 and 1920. One of their most notable actions was the suppression of the Spartacist uprising in January 1919. Later, they were also involved in quelling a major communist uprising in the Ruhr industrial area in March to April 1920, known as the Red Rising. The Freikorps were known for their violent methods and strong anti-communist beliefs. They were a powerful force used by the Weimar government to maintain order during a time of political instability. However, their actions also contributed to the ongoing violence and unrest in post-war Germany. The Kapp Putsch of 1920. The Kapp Putsch was a right-wing uprising in Germany led by Wolfgang Kapp in March 1920. It was triggered when President Erber tried to disband 2 units of the Freikorps, private armies made up of ex-soldiers. In response, Kapp led 5,000 men from the Freikorps to take over Berlin in an attempt to overthrow the government. The term Putsch means rebellion, and the aim of the Kapp Putsch was to take control of Germany, restore the strength of the army, and regain the land lost in the Treaty of Versailles. Kapp and his followers even invited the former Kaiser, who was in exile, to return and lead the country. When the Putsch began, the German army refused to fight against the Freikorps, showing their support for Kapp's cause. In response, President Erber called for a general strike, urging workers to stop all work. This strike was highly effective, leading to a complete shutdown of essential services such as gas, water, electricity, and trains. The strike brought Berlin to a standstill and made it impossible for Kapp to govern. After just 4 days, Kapp realised his plan had failed. He fled to Sweden, but was later captured and imprisoned, where he eventually died. The Kapp Putsch highlighted the instability and divisions within Germany at the time, and the government's reliance on the support of workers to maintain control. It also showed the challenges the Weimar Republic faced from right-wing groups, who were unhappy with the new democratic government and the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Political violence. Between 1990 and 1920, Germany experienced significant political violence, with over 350 political murders occurring during this period. Most of these murders were carried out by right-wing extremists who were opposed to the new democratic government and blamed various politicians for Germany's defeat in the First World War and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Notable assassinations. Matthias Erzberger. In August 1921, Matthias Erzberger, a politician who had signed the armistice ending the First World War, was shot and killed while on holiday in the Black Forest. His assassination was a result of the hatred many right-wing extremists felt towards those they believed had betrayed Germany. Walter Rathenau. In June 1922, Walter Rathenau, the German foreign minister, was machine-gunned to death in Berlin. Rathenau was targeted because of his role in negotiating the Treaty of Versailles and his Jewish heritage, which made him a target for anti-Semitic right-wing extremists. Despite the severity of these crimes, many of the murderers received only short prison sentences, with the average being around 4 years. This leniency was partly due to the sympathies that many in the judiciary and police had for the right-wing cause. Private armies. In response to the ongoing violence and instability, many political parties hired ex-soldiers to guard their meetings and protect their leaders. These private armies included the Red Front Fighters. Established by the Communist Party of Germany, this group was made up of ex-soldiers who protected communist meetings and their leaders. The Steel Helmets. Formed by the German National People's Party, this paramilitary organisation was composed of former soldiers who supported the right-wing nationalist cause. The Black, Red, Gold flag. This was the private army of the Social Democratic Party of Germany. It was created to defend democracy and protect its members from attacks. The political violence in Germany during this period highlighted the deep divisions within the country and the fragility of the Weimar Republic. It also showed the lengths to which political parties would go to protect themselves and their interests, further contributing to the unstable and dangerous political climate of the time. In summary, the Weimar Republic faced threats from both left-wing and right-wing groups, using strikes, uprisings, and propaganda to challenge the government. The Spartacus uprising, led by communists, was crushed by the Freikorps, and leaders Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht were killed. The Freikorps were ex-soldiers who violently suppressed left-wing revolts, but also supported right-wing movements like the Cat Putsch, which failed due to a general strike. Political violence surged, with over 350 political murders between 1919 and 1920, including assassinations of politicians like Matthias Erzberger and Walter Rathenau. Right-wing paramilitary groups like the Freikorps and left-wing groups like the Red Front Fighters clashed, contributing to instability. Despite these challenges, the Weimar Republic survived, but unrest from extremist groups highlighted the fragile state of German democracy in the 1920s. Recovery of the Weimar Republic, 1924 to 29. In this video, we are looking at the economic recovery, including the impact of US loans, the diplomacy of Gustav Stresemann, and cultural change in the 1920s. In 1923, Germany faced severe crises, with the French occupation of the Ruhr and hyperinflation, leading to economic chaos. However, between 1924 and 1929, Germany overcame these problems and entered a period of stability. The Dawes Plan of 1924 restructured reparations and brought in American loans, stabilising the economy and ending hyperinflation. As a result, industrial production resumed, unemployment fell, and political stability improved. This period, often called the Golden Age, saw Germany regain a sense of normality and optimism. Key individual: Gustav Stresemann. Stresemann was born on the 10th of May 1878 in Berlin. He was the son of a restaurant owner and grew up in a modest family. He excelled in his studies and went on to study economics at university. After completing his education, he pursued a career in business. In 1907, at the age of 29, Stresemann became the youngest member of the Reichstag. His early entry into politics showcased his talent and ambition. During the First World War, Stresemann's poor health prevented him from joining the army, but he remained active in political circles. In 1919, following the end of the war and the abdication of the Kaiser, Stresemann founded the moderate German People's Party, the DVP. The DVP aimed to support the Weimar Republic and promote economic stability, Stresemann's abilities as a speaker and administrator made him a prominent figure in German politics. In August 1923, President Erbe appointed Stresemann as Chancellor to address the severe economic crisis facing Germany. Stresemann led the Great Coalition government, which included multiple political parties working together to stabilise the country. Although he was Chancellor for only 4 months, losing the support of the Reichstag in November 1923, his brief time in office was marked by significant efforts to tackle hyperinflation and economic instability. After stepping down as Chancellor, Stresemann became Germany's foreign minister, a position he held until his death in October 1929. In this role, he played a crucial part in Germany's recovery and reintegration into the international community. Stresemann aimed to stabilise the economy and gain international respect for Germany. In recognition of his diplomatic efforts, Stresemann was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1926. Despite being advised to stop working due to his poor health in 1927, he continued to serve as foreign minister, driven by his dedication to Germany's recovery. Stresemann's policies and international agreements helped to stabilise Europe and improve relations between Germany and its former enemies. Introduction of the Rentenmark. As a result of the hyperinflation crisis in 1923, the German currency had become worthless. In November 1923, Stresemann introduced a new currency, the Rentenmark, as a temporary solution. The printing of the Rentenmark was strictly controlled, which helped restore confidence. This new currency was based on the value of German industry and agriculture, and could be exchanged for shares in land and industry if it failed. In 1924, the Reichsbank, a new independent national bank, was established, and it issued the Reichsmark to replace the Rentenmark as Germany's permanent currency. These measures restored stability to Germany's financial system. The Dawes and Young plans. Stresemann believed that the German economy could not fully recover until the issue of reparations was addressed. He thought that Germany should accept the terms of the Treaty of Versailles in hopes of negotiating better terms. This led to the implementation of the Dawes Plan and later the Young Plan, which played significant roles in Germany's economic recovery. The Dawes Plan of 1924. In 1923, Charles Dawes, an American banker, was sent to Germany by the Allies to help resolve the non-payment of reparations. The USA had a vested interest in seeing the German economy recover because it had lent large sums of money to Britain and France during the First World War, and they would be better able to repay these loans if Germany could make its reparations payments. In 1924, the Dawes Plan was agreed upon between Germany and the Allies. The key parts of the Dawes Plan included the USA loaning Germany 800 million gold marks, lowering reparation payments for 5 years to 1,000 million marks annually, after which they would return to 2,500 million marks. The French agreed to withdraw from the Ruhr, and the Allies gained some control over the Reichsbank. The Young Plan of 1929. The Young Plan was developed by a committee set up by the Allies and led by American banker Owen Young. This plan further reduced Germany's reparation burden, decreasing the total amount from £6.6 billion to £2 billion, to be paid over 59 years. Additionally, the French agreed to leave the Rhineland 5 years earlier than previously planned. Impact of US loans. The Dawes Plan played a crucial role in Germany's economic recovery. Over the next 6 years, Germany received 25 billion marks in US loans, significantly boosting the economy. Industrial output doubled between 1923 and 1929, wages rose, the cost of living decreased, and living standards improved. Increased public spending led to the construction of new roads, schools, and public buildings. In 1927, new labour laws were introduced, allowing people to claim unemployment benefits and creating labour exchanges to help people find work. Similarly, the Young Plan allowed for lower taxes. This boosted public spending and created jobs, further contributing to the economic recovery. Limitations. However, this recovery was fragile because it heavily depended on US loans. Stresemann himself acknowledged this fragility in 1929, stating, "The economic position is only flourishing on the surface. Germany is in fact dancing on a volcano. If the short-term loans are called in by America, a large section of our economy would collapse." Extremist parties, particularly on the right wing, opposed both the Dawes and Young plans because they involved accepting the Treaty of Versailles. Under the Young Plan, annual payments would still be £50 million, and extend to 1988, further fueling their opposition. The Young Plan ultimately failed due to the Wall Street crash later in 1929, which caused a severe economic crisis. The growth driven by the Dawes Plan was highly dependent on continued American financial support, making it vulnerable to any changes in the US economy. By 1927, signs of slowing economic growth and struggles in the farming industry already highlighted the fragile nature of the recovery. International agreements. Gustav Stresemann used diplomacy to improve Germany's international position, believing this was the best way to renegotiate the Treaty of Versailles. His efforts led to several significant international agreements that played a crucial role in Germany's recovery. Ending passive resistance. In 1923, Stresemann called off passive resistance in the Ruhr, ending the economic paralysis caused by the French occupation and helping to stabilise the economy. The Locarno Pact of 1925. In 1925, Germany signed the Locarno Pact, a collection of 7 treaties with countries including France, Britain, Czechoslovakia and Poland. Germany agreed to accept its western borders and resolve issues concerning its eastern borders through peaceful means. Joining the League of Nations in 1926. In 1926, Germany was allowed into the League of Nations, an organisation formed after the First World War to resolve disputes peacefully. Despite initial exclusion, Germany secured a place on the Council, where key decisions were made. This move was supported by many moderate politicians, but opposed by nationalists. The Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928. In August 1928, Germany signed the Kellogg-Briand Pact, along with 62 other countries, agreeing not to use military force to settle disputes. Impact. By 1929, Germany's international position had significantly improved. It was considered a major power again, and the Weimar Republic had become a respected and stable state, which boosted the government's popularity. Election results for May 1924 to May 1928 showed that moderate parties increased their share of the vote from 50% to 58%, while extremist parties saw their share decline from 40% to 28%. This positive shift was further aided by the death of President Erberg in 1925 and his replacement by Paul von Hindenburg, a respected army field marshal. However, the death of Stresemann from a heart attack on the 3rd of October 1929 was a severe blow to Germany. Cultural change. The 1920s were known as a golden age for German culture, marked by significant changes and flourishing artistic expression. This period saw artists, writers, poets and performers thrive due to the removal of strict controls on entertainment that existed under the Kaiser. The Weimar Constitution guaranteed freedom of speech, which combined with economic recovery after 1924 led to increased investment in the arts and more experimental approaches. Art. Avant-garde artists like Otto Dix depicted the realities of everyday life, often showing the harsh conditions and criticising German society. This new realistic style was a stark contrast to the idealised art of the past. Design. The Bauhaus School, a design college in Berlin, introduced modern and simple designs that broke away from traditional styles. The Bauhaus movement became famous for its innovative and functional approach to design. Cinema. Cinema became immensely popular in the 1920s. Fritz Lang's Metropolis, a science fiction film, was the most technically advanced film of its time. German-born actress Marlene Dietrich became an international star. The first sound film was made in 1930, and by 1932 there were 3,800 cinemas in Germany showing films with sound. Literature. Germany had 120 newspapers and magazines during this period. One of the most notable works was All Quiet on the Western Front by Erich Remarque, an anti-war novel that sold 500,000 copies in just 3 months. Nightlife. Berlin in particular was famous for its vibrant nightlife. The city had plays, operas and theatres, and live bands often played American jazz. Some clubs featured naked dancers, and musicians performed songs that were critical of politicians. These cultural changes were met with mixed reactions. While they were popular with many, they were also hated by others. Right-wing opponents were concerned about what they saw as a moral decline in Germany. fearing that the new freedoms were leading to decadence. On the left, critics argued that the money spent on the arts should instead be used to help working people who were struggling. In summary, Gustav Stresemann played a crucial role in Germany's recovery as Chancellor and Foreign Minister, stabilising the economy, introducing the Rentenmark, and securing international loans. The Dawes Plan restructured reparations, reduced payments, and led to French withdrawal from the Ruhr, while the Young Plan further reduced reparations. Stresemann's diplomacy led to key international agreements like the Locarno Pact, joining the League of Nations, and the Kellogg-Briand Pact, improving Germany's global standing. US loans boosted the economy, doubling industrial output by 1929, but the recovery remained fragile, heavily dependent on American financial support. Stresemann's death in 1929 and the Wall Street crash exposed the fragility of Germany's recovery, setting the stage for future economic crisis. The 1920s in Germany, known as a golden age of culture, saw flourishing art, cinema, design, literature and nightlife due to newfound freedoms and economic recovery. The early development of the Nazi Party from 1920 to 22. In this video, we are looking at Hitler and the German Workers' Party and the early growth and features of the Nazi Party. Key individual, Adolf Hitler. Hitler was born on the 20th of April 1889 in Braunau am Inn, a small town in Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Hitler, was a customs official, and his mother, Clara, was a housewife. From a young age, Hitler showed an interest in art and aspired to become an artist. After finishing school, Hitler moved to Vienna, the capital of Austria-Hungary, to pursue his dream of joining the prestigious Vienna Art Academy. Unfortunately for him, he failed the entrance exam twice and was not accepted. This was a significant disappointment for Hitler, who had to abandon his artistic ambitions. To make ends meet, he did various jobs, including painting postcards and advertisements. In 1913, Hitler moved to Munich in Germany. He was looking for a fresh start and was drawn to the vibrant cultural and political scene in Germany. The following year, in 1914, the First World War broke out. Hitler saw the war as an opportunity and joined the German army. During the war, Hitler primarily worked as a messenger, carrying important messages between the front lines and the command posts. This was a dangerous job, and Hitler was involved in many battles. He showed bravery and dedication, which led to his promotion to the rank of corporal. For his courage, he was awarded the Iron Cross, a prestigious military decoration. In October 1918, Hitler was injured in a gas attack and suffered temporary blindness. He was hospitalised, recovering from gas poisoning, when the armistice was signed on the 11th of November, ending the First World War. The defeat of Germany and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles deeply affected Hitler, shaping his future political beliefs and ambitions. Hitler and the German Workers' Party. After being released from hospital, Hitler returned to Munich. Seeking a new direction, he found work with the German army. His job was to investigate and monitor new political groups that were forming in Munich during this turbulent time. One of these groups was the German Workers' Party, a small political party led by Anton Drexler. The DAP, like many other groups in Munich, held its meetings in beer halls, which were popular gathering places. Hitler attended his first DAP meeting in September 1919 out of curiosity and as part of his duties. The German Workers' Party appealed to Hitler and many other ex-soldiers for several reasons. The party was strongly opposed to the Treaty of Versailles, which they believed unjustly blamed Germany for the war and imposed severe reparations. The DAP also blamed the defeat on the Weimar politicians, Jewish people, and communists. They shared a vision of making Germany a powerful nation again under a strong leader, a vision that resonated deeply with Hitler. Impressed by the party's ideas and seeing potential in its nationalist and anti-Semitic ideology, Hitler joined the German Workers' Party almost immediately. His powerful oratory skills and passion quickly made him a prominent member. Early growth and features of the Nazi Party. The 25-point programme. In January 1920, Hitler became head of propaganda for the German Workers' Party. Working closely with Anton Drexler, he developed the 25-point programme to clearly outline the party's policies and objectives. This programme was designed to attract a broad range of supporters by combining both nationalist and socialist elements. The nationalist elements of the programme aimed to restore Germany's international position and prestige following the defeat in the First World War, establish a strong central government under a single leader to enforce order and stability, and promote autarky, meaning making Germany self-sufficient and less dependent on foreign imports. The socialist elements of the party focused on ensuring that all people had equal rights and opportunities, addressing social inequalities, the redistribution of land from large landowners for the common good, which aimed to reduce the power of the wealthy elite and support the working class. Additionally, the programme was explicitly anti-Semitic, blaming Jewish people for many of Germany's problems and calling for their expulsion from the country. This anti-Semitic stance was intended to unify supporters against a common enemy and was a central part of the party's ideology. Expanding the party's reach. Hitler aimed to attract new members to the party through various strategies, making full use of his oratory skills. His speeches were well rehearsed, passionate and persuasive, significantly boosting his influence and drawing large crowds. These gatherings were often publicised through advertisements, ensuring maximum attendance and exposure. To further spread the party's message, the DAP purchased a newspaper called the People's Observer. This newspaper played a crucial role in spreading the party's propaganda, allowing them to reach a wider audience and gain more supporters. Through articles and editorials, the party could communicate its views and policies directly to the public, bypassing other media outlets that might be less sympathetic to their cause. In addition to these efforts, the party underwent a rebranding to enhance its appeal. The name was changed to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, commonly known as the Nazi Party. This new name reflected the blend of nationalism and socialism, broadening the party's appeal to various groups in German society, including both nationalists and workers. Hitler also designed a new flag and symbol for the party, adopting the swastika as its emblem. This powerful and easily recognisable symbol, along with the straight-arm salute, provided the party with a distinct and cohesive identity. These elements helped differentiate the Nazi Party from other political groups, making it more memorable and visually striking. Through these efforts, Hitler and the Nazi Party were able to significantly expand their reach, attracting a diverse and growing base of supporters. Hitler's rise to leadership. In January 1921, Hitler forced a leadership contest and successfully defeated Anton Drexler, becoming the undisputed leader of the party. This allowed Hitler to take control and direct the party according to his vision. To strengthen his position, Hitler surrounded himself with skilled and influential supporters. One of these supporters was Hermann Göring, a wealthy First World War fighter pilot who brought both respect and financial support to the party. Another key supporter was Julius Streicher, a nationalist politician with a strong following in central Germany who used his influence to help the party grow. Ernst Röhm, a popular ex-army officer, also joined Hitler's inner circle, using his military experience to help organise and lead the party's private army. Hitler also developed an important friendship with General Ludendorff, the former German army commander during the First World War. Ludendorff's support gave the Nazi Party more credibility and attracted former soldiers who respected his military leadership. The SA. In August 1921, Hitler established the Sturmabteilung, also known as the Stormtroopers or Brown Shirts due to the colour of their uniforms. This private army was created to provide the Nazi Party with a paramilitary force that could protect its interests and further its agenda. Many of the SA members were unemployed ex-soldiers who were attracted to the organisation by the promise of camaraderie, purpose, and a sense of belonging after the disillusionment of the First World War. The SA was led by Ernst Röhm. Under Röhm's leadership, the SA used violence and intimidation as key tactics to achieve the party's goals. They dealt with opponents by attacking and intimidating those who criticised or opposed the Nazi Party. The SA also played a crucial role in disrupting the meetings of other political parties, often breaking up gatherings with force and ensuring that rival groups could not gain a foothold. Additionally, they guarded Nazi meetings, providing security and demonstrating the party's strength and discipline. The power and organisation of the SA were significant factors in attracting new members to the Nazi Party. Their aggressive tactics and visible presence helped to create an image of strength and order, which appealed to many Germans who were frustrated with the political instability and economic difficulties of the time. Consolidation of power. At a party conference in January 1922, Hitler took a decisive step to consolidate his control over the Nazi Party. He convinced the members to give up their right to elect the party leader, thereby centralising power in his hands. This marked a critical transformation of the Nazi Party from a loosely organised political group into a tightly controlled organisation entirely under Hitler's command. Membership growth. Under Hitler's leadership, the Nazi Party experienced rapid growth in membership. The number of members increased from 3,000 in 1920 to 5,000 in 1921, reflecting the initial success of Hitler's efforts to expand the party's reach. By November 1923, the membership had risen steeply to 50,000, demonstrating the effectiveness of the party's propaganda, the appeal of its message, and the organisational strength of the SA. In summary, after serving in the First World War, Hitler joined the German Workers' Party. His speaking abilities quickly gained him influence, and he saw potential in the party's nationalist and anti-Semitic ideas. Hitler and Anton Drexler created the 25-point programme, outlining nationalist and socialist goals. It called for reversing the Treaty of Versailles, promoting German self-sufficiency, and enforcing anti-Semitic policies. The DAP was renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party to attract a wider range of supporters. The party adopted the swastika as its symbol for a distinct identity. Hitler forced a leadership contest in 1921 and became leader of the Nazi Party. He began shaping the party's future with support from influential figures like Hermann Göring and Ernst Röhm. Hitler established the SA as the party's paramilitary wing. Led by Ernst Röhm, they used violence and intimidation to disrupt political opponents and protect Nazi gatherings. By 1923, Nazi Party membership grew from 3,000 to 50,000. Hitler's speeches, propaganda efforts, and the SA's violent tactics helped increase the party's influence and appeal across Germany. The Munich Putsch and the lean years, 1923 to 29. In this video, we are looking at the causes, events, and consequences of the Munich Putsch, the reorganisation of the Nazi Party, and reasons for limited support. Reasons for the Munich Putsch. By November 1923, a combination of factors led Hitler and the Nazis to believe they could successfully overthrow the government and seize control of Germany. These included hostility towards the Weimar Republic. Many Germans continued to feel betrayed by their government due to its association with the stab-in-the-back theory and the harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. This anger and humiliation led to increased support for nationalist parties like the Nazis, who promised to restore Germany's former glory. Political climate in Bavaria. In Bavaria, leaders like Gustav von Kahr openly expressed their dislike for the Weimar Republic. They wanted a more conservative and nationalist government. This made Bavaria an ideal place for an attempted seizure of power, as the local leaders were not dedicated to protecting the democratic government of the Weimar Republic. Year of crisis. 1923 was a particularly difficult year for Germany, with the French occupation of the Ruhr leading to hyperinflation. Many Germans saw the Weimar government as weak and incapable of handling the crisis, making it an ideal time for extremists like the Nazis to attempt to seize power. Hitler's belief in Nazi strength. By 1923, Hitler believed that the Nazi Party was strong enough to overthrow the government. The party's membership had grown to 50,000, and they had the SA, which could use violence to aid the attempted takeover. Additionally, Hitler had the backing of General Ludendorff, who he thought could persuade the army to support the Nazi takeover. Inspiration from Mussolini. Hitler was also inspired by Benito Mussolini, the leader of the fascist party in Italy. In 1922, Mussolini had successfully seized control of Italy through a dramatic march on Rome. Hitler admired this bold move and thought a similar strategy could work in Germany. He planned to march on Berlin after taking control of Munich, hoping to replicate Mussolini's success. Events of the Munich Putsch. 8th of November 1923. Hitler and his followers interrupted a meeting in a Munich beer hall where Gustav von Kahr, head of the Bavarian government, and Otto von Lossow, head of the German army in Bavaria, were speaking. Hitler fired a bullet at the ceiling and declared he was taking over Bavaria, announcing plans to march on Berlin and install General Ludendorff as Germany's new leader. Kahr and Lossow were taken hostage. General Ludendorff soon arrived, claimed he was aware of the plan and expressed his support. Meanwhile, the SA took control of key government buildings around Munich and arrested several officials. Under pressure, Kahr and Lossow promised to support the putsch and were released. The 9th of November 1923. The next day, President Erbe declared a state of emergency and ordered Lossow to crush the uprising. Lossow and Kahr, now free from the immediate threat, publicly announced their opposition to the putsch. Undeterred, Hitler began a march through Munich with about 2,000 supporters. They were met by armed police and soldiers. A brief but intense gun battle ensued, resulting in the deaths of 3 policemen and 14 Nazis. During the chaos, Hitler was wounded, dislocating his shoulder as he was pulled to the ground by one of his bodyguards. The 11th of November 1923. After the failed march, Hitler fled in a car and hid at a friend's house about 10 miles south of Munich. He was discovered on the 11th of November, arrested and taken into custody. Consequences of the Munich Putsch. The Munich Putsch had several significant consequences for Hitler and the Nazi Party, shaping their future strategies and actions. Hitler's trial and imprisonment. After the failed putsch, Hitler was arrested and put on trial for treason, starting in February 1924. His trial lasted 24 days and was widely reported across Germany. During the trial, Hitler used the opportunity to criticise the Weimar government and promote his political views. General Ludendorff, who had supported the putsch, was acquitted, while Hitler was sentenced to 5 years in prison at Landsberg Castle. However, due to the judiciary's sympathy towards his nationalist cause, Hitler only served 9 months, being released in December 1924. This lenient sentence was surprising, as he could have received a much harsher punishment, including the death penalty. Additionally, the Nazi Party was banned as a result of the putsch. Writing of Mein Kampf. During his time in prison, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, an autobiographical book outlining his political and racial views. He dictated the book to Rudolf Hess, who later became the deputy leader of the Nazi Party. Mein Kampf detailed many of the ideas Hitler would later implement, including the dominance of the Aryan race, warnings of a Jewish conspiracy to undermine the Aryan race, the dismantling of the Treaty of Versailles, the concept of Lebensraum and the expansion of Germany, the defeat of communism, and the end of democracy and the establishment of a strong government under one leader. Strategic lessons. The failure of the Munich Putsch taught Hitler a crucial lesson. The use of force to seize power had failed. He realised that he needed to change his strategy. Instead of attempting to overthrow the government through violence, Hitler decided that the Nazi Party would have to gain power through democratic means. This led to a new approach focused on winning elections and gaining political influence legally, which ultimately contributed to their rise to power in 1933. Reorganisation of the Nazi Party from 1924 to 28. In February 1925, the ban on the Nazi Party was lifted. Hitler relaunched the party in the same beer hall where the Munich Putsch had taken place, symbolising a fresh start and determination to achieve their goals through new methods. To make the Nazi Party more appealing and efficient, Hitler implemented several key changes. A national party headquarters was established in Munich, making it the central hub for Nazi operations. Germany was divided into 35 districts, known as Gau. Each Gau was headed by a Nazi Party member called a Gauleiter. This structure helped to organise and control the party's activities across the country. The party raised money from wealthy industrialists who supported their anti-communist stance, providing much-needed funds for expansion and propaganda. Meetings were held across Germany to spread Nazi ideas and attract new members. A new private bodyguard, the SS or Protection Squad, was established, loyal to Hitler. This group was later placed under the control of Heinrich Himmler and played a crucial role in maintaining order and security within the party. Special groups like the Nazi Women's League and the Hitler Youth were created to appeal to different segments of society, including women and young people. The party concentrated on winning the support of farmers who were struggling with economic difficulties in the late 1920s. This focus helped to broaden their base of support. The Bamberg Conference of 1926. In 1926, a conference was held at Bamberg to address internal divisions within the party. There was a split between those emphasising the socialist elements, mainly in urban industrial areas in the north, and those focusing on nationalist elements, mainly in southern rural areas. During this conference, Hitler spoke for 5 hours, siding with the nationalist wing of the party. This helped to unify the party under his leadership and re-establish the 25-point plan as their core programme. By 1929, the Nazi Party had grown significantly, with membership exceeding 100,000. It had become a well-organised political force, ready to take advantage of any opportunities to increase its influence and power in Germany. Limited support for the Nazi Party between 1924 and 29. Despite their reorganisation and efforts to expand, the Nazi Party experienced limited success during the years 1924 to 29. In the May 1928 elections, they won only 28 seats in the Reichstag, receiving just 2.6% of the vote. This showed that while the party was growing in size, it was not yet gaining widespread electoral support. As a result, this period is often referred to as the party's lean years. One of the main reasons for the limited support was the work of Gustav Stresemann. Stresemann's policies helped stabilise the German economy and improve its international standing. He negotiated the Dawes Plan, which restructured Germany's reparation payments and secured loans from the United States, leading to economic recovery and a period of relative prosperity. This made extremist groups like the Nazis less appealing to the general public. Another factor was the election of Paul von Hindenburg as president in 1925. Hindenburg was a respected war hero, and his presidency increased support for the Weimar Republic. Many Germans felt reassured by his leadership, reducing the appeal of extremist parties that wanted to overthrow the government. In summary, by 1923, Hitler and the Nazis believed they could overthrow the Weimar Republic due to widespread discontent with the government and the economic crisis of hyperinflation. On the 8th to the 9th of November 1923, Hitler and the Nazis attempted a coup in Munich, but it quickly failed after a confrontation with the police, resulting in deaths and Hitler's arrest. Hitler gained publicity during his trial, wrote Mein Kampf whilst in prison, and decided to pursue power legally. After being released, Hitler restructured the Nazi Party to focus on electoral success. He built a stronger, more organised party with dedicated branches and targeted various groups across society. Despite reorganisation, the Nazis struggled for widespread support. The relative stability under Gustav Stresemann and the popularity of President Hindenburg made extremist views less appealing to most Germans. Growth in support for the Nazis between 1929 and 32. In this video, we are looking at the causes and impact of the Great Depression, the failure of democracy, and Nazi methods to win support. Causes of the Great Depression. In the 1920s, the American economy was booming. Industries were growing rapidly, and many Americans were earning higher wages. With more money to spend and invest, people started buying stocks. Stocks are small pieces of a company that people can buy. When the company does well, the value of the stock goes up, and people can make a profit by selling them. Seeing the potential to make money, many Americans began investing in the stock market. However, not everyone understood how the stock market worked. This led to a lot of speculation. Speculation is when people buy stocks, hoping the prices will go up so they can sell them for a profit, without really considering whether the company's value was actually increasing. By October 1929, the stock market was very unstable. On the 24th of October 1929, a day known as Black Thursday, the stock market began to fall sharply. Many investors panicked and started selling their stocks quickly. As more people sold their stocks, prices dropped even further. This led to more panic and more selling. The rapid selling of shares caused a massive drop in stock prices. Within a week, investors had lost around $4,000 million. Because people had borrowed money from banks to buy stocks, when the stock market crashed, they couldn't repay their loans. Banks began to repossess homes and goods from those who couldn't pay, leading to even more financial hardship. As people lost their savings and investments, they stopped spending money on goods and services. This caused businesses to lose customers and go out of business. When businesses closed, many people lost their jobs, leading to a rise in unemployment. With so many people out of work, even fewer people could afford to buy goods, causing a further downturn in the economy. Banks failed, businesses closed, and unemployment soared. This period, known as the Great Depression, lasted throughout the 1930s and had a significant impact not only in America but around the world. Impact of the Depression on Germany. The Great Depression had a devastating impact on Germany, affecting nearly every aspect of life in the country. Germany was particularly hard hit by the Depression for two main reasons. Firstly, the decline in exports. The economic downturn in America led to a sharp decrease in the demand for goods that Germany exported, such as cars and electrical goods. With fewer buyers for these products, many German businesses faced financial difficulties and were forced to close. This resulted in a significant loss of jobs and a rise in unemployment. Secondly, the repayment of loans. During the 1920s, Germany had borrowed heavily from American banks to help rebuild its economy after the First World War. When the Depression hit, these American banks demanded that their loans be repaid. German banks, in turn, pressured businesses to repay their loans, but many businesses were unable to do so. This caused even more businesses to fail and led to a banking crisis. Unemployment. The effects of these economic problems were severe. Unemployment in Germany soared from 1.3 million in September 1929 to a staggering 6.1 million by January 1933. The widespread job losses led to increased homelessness and poverty. The government struggled to cope with the rising demand for unemployment benefits, which forced them to raise taxes. This in turn further strained the economy. Different groups affected. Business owners. The reduced demand for goods meant that many businesses saw their profits plummet. Businesses of all sizes struggled to stay afloat and many failed, adding to the unemployment crisis. Farmers. German farmers had already been struggling since the mid-1920s due to falling prices for agricultural products. The Depression worsened their situation, leading many into deeper debt as they could not sell their produce at profitable prices. Workers. Factory workers faced a grim reality as well. About 40% of them were unemployed, and those who managed to keep their jobs experienced significant wage cuts. By 1932, real wages had fallen to 70% of their 1928 levels, meaning that even employed workers struggled to make ends meet. Young people. The impact on young people was particularly harsh. By 1933, over 50% of people aged 16 to 30 were unemployed. This left many young Germans without prospects and contributed to social unrest. Even those with higher education were not spared. Around 60% of university graduates were unemployed, finding it nearly impossible to secure jobs in a shrinking job market. The failure of democracy. The Great Depression had a profound political impact on Germany, leading to the failure of democracy and the rise of extremist parties. The Weimar Republic struggled to address the severe economic crisis caused by the Depression. The two main moderate parties, the Social Democratic Party and the Centre Party, could not agree on how to reduce unemployment and revive the economy. This political deadlock made the government appear weak and ineffective. In 1930, Hermann Müller of the SDP resigned as Chancellor because his party could not agree on policies with the Centre Party. He was replaced by Heinrich Brüning from the Centre Party. However, Brüning did not have a majority in the Reichstag and had to rely on President Hindenburg's emergency powers to govern. Brüning used Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution, which allowed the president to issue emergency decrees without the Reichstag's approval. In 1932 alone, he issued 66 decrees. This essentially suspended democracy as the Reichstag met only 13 times that year. Brüning's policies, which included tax increases and cuts to unemployment benefits, were deeply unpopular, leading to his resignation in May 1932. As the Weimar government failed to effectively tackle the economic crisis, many Germans turned to extremist parties that promised radical solutions. The left-wing Communist Party and the right-wing Nazi Party gained significant support. In the 1930 election, the Nazi Party increased its seats in the Reichstag from 12 to 107, making it one of the largest parties. The Nazis promised to restore Germany's economy and national pride, appealing to a wide range of voters frustrated with the status quo. The Communist Party also saw its seats rise from 54 to 77. The Communists argued that the Depression was proof that the capitalist system was failing. Their message resonated particularly with the working class in urban areas, who were suffering from high unemployment and falling wages. The German Communist Party became the second largest in Europe outside the Soviet Union. Nazi methods to win support. Between 1929 and 1932, the Nazis used a variety of methods to win support in Germany. These methods were carefully designed to appeal to different groups within German society and to exploit the weaknesses of the Weimar Republic. Key strategies used included the appeal of Hitler. Hitler was a charismatic and inspiring speaker who presented himself as the saviour of Germany. He had a powerful presence and could captivate audiences with his speeches. In 1932, Hitler used an aeroplane in the Deutschlandflug campaign, allowing him to visit 20 cities in just 7 days. This extensive travel helped him reach a wide audience and reinforced his image as a dynamic and modern leader. The fear of communism. As the Depression worsened, many Germans feared the rise of communism. The Communist Party was gaining support, especially among the working class. Hitler promised to deal with the communist threat, which appealed to businessmen and landowners who feared losing their property and wealth. This fear also extended to the middle and upper classes, who saw the Nazis as protection against communism. The use of propaganda. Propaganda played a crucial role in the Nazi campaign. Joseph Goebbels, who became the Nazi chief propagandist in 1928, used various media to spread their message. The Nazis utilised radio broadcasts, cinema news reports, leaflets and posters. Their propaganda was clear, simple and targeted specific groups. Posters often featured slogans like work and bread, promising solutions to the problems caused by the Depression. Parades and rallies. The Nazis organised large parades and rallies to showcase their order and discipline. These events were designed to impress the public and demonstrate the strength and unity of the Nazi Party. The spectacle of these rallies helped to create a sense of excitement and movement that attracted many supporters. Appealing to different groups. The Nazis tailored their message to appeal to various segments of society. Big business. Offered strong leadership and the promise that factory owners could run their businesses as they saw fit. Wealthy business owners, fearing communism, donated large sums to the Nazi Party. Farmers. Promised higher prices for crops, a better standard of living and a higher status in society. They also reassured farmers by altering their land confiscation policy to target only Jewish-owned land. Middle class. Appealed to professionals and small business owners who were disillusioned with the Weimar Republic and feared a breakdown in law and order. The Nazis promised decisive action and stability. Women. Promoted traditional family values, contrasting with the more progressive image of women in the 1920s. Working class. Promised jobs and food, emphasising traditional values and a stronger Germany. Although the Communist Party was more popular among workers, the Nazis still gained significant support. Young people. The dynamic and radical image of the Nazi Party attracted many young people who found it more exciting and inspiring than other political parties. The role of the SA. The SA played a significant role in the Nazi rise to power. By 1930, the SA had grown to 400,000 members. They made the Nazi Party appear strong, organised and disciplined. The SA disrupted the meetings of political opponents and used violence and intimidation during elections, particularly in 1930 and 1932, to influence the outcome in favour of the Nazis. In summary, the 1929 stock market crash led to massive unemployment and poverty in Germany, causing many to lose faith in the Weimar Republic and turn to radical solutions like the Nazis. Germany was hit hard by the recall of American loans and the collapse of exports, leading to business closures and mass unemployment, which made the Nazi message appealing. The Weimar Republic seemed weak, relying on emergency powers and unable to solve the crisis, which pushed people towards extremist parties like the Nazis. The Nazis promised to restore Germany and used propaganda to target groups with messages of hope, using rallies, posters and radio to attract support. The rise of the Communist Party frightened many Germans, especially the middle class and business owners, who saw the Nazis as a defence against communism. The SA's presence and use of violence projected strength, disrupting opponents and influencing elections, which helped the Nazis gain support. Hitler's appointment as Chancellor from 1932 to 33. In this video, we are looking at the roles of Hindenburg, von Schleicher and von Papen, the events of 1932 to 33, and the decision to appoint Hitler as Chancellor in January 1933. The period between 1932 and 1933 in Germany was marked by intense political instability and a series of events that ultimately led to Hitler becoming Chancellor. Key to this were three individuals: Hindenburg, von Schleicher and von Papen. Paul von Hindenburg. Hindenburg was President of Germany from May 1925 until his death in August 1934. Before becoming president, he was a famous military commander known for winning the Battle of Tannenberg against Russia in 1914. Hindenburg was strongly conservative and believed in traditional military values. He didn't trust democracy much and preferred strong, authoritative leadership, similar to how Germany was governed under the Kaiser. Kurt von Schleicher. Von Schleicher was a high-ranking army general, an important political figure during the early 1930s, serving as an advisor to President Hindenburg. He believed in strong military leadership and was against democratic processes, favouring more authoritarian rule. Von Schleicher used his military influence to try to stabilise Germany through non-democratic means. Franz von Papen. Von Papen was a member of the Centre Party and a conservative politician. He had served as a military officer and held various diplomatic positions. Like Hindenburg and von Schleicher, von Papen believed in traditional values and preferred strong authoritative leadership over democracy. His political actions focused on maintaining conservative control and opposing left-wing and democratic elements in the government. All three believed they could manipulate and control Hitler, but this proved to be a major mistake with the most serious consequences. March and April 1932 presidential elections. In March 1932, presidential elections were held in Germany. Hindenburg, despite being 84 and frail, agreed to stand for re-election to help bring stability to the nation. The results of the election were as follows. Hindenburg received 49.6% of the votes, Hitler 30%, and Ernst Thälmann, the Communist Party leader, 14%. Since no candidate received more than 50% of the vote, a second election was scheduled for April. Campaigning for the April election was violent, with street fighting and the SA disrupting communist rallies. In the second election, Hindenburg received 53% of the votes, Hitler 36%, and Thälmann 11%. Hindenburg was therefore re-elected as president. Fall of Brüning and rise of von Papen. In May 1932, Chancellor Brüning resigned after losing support in the Reichstag. This was partly due to his controversial decisions to ban the SA and SS, and his plan to buy up land from large landowners to house the unemployed, which united the right wing against him. Von Schleicher suggested von Papen as Chancellor. Hindenburg was persuaded that the Nazis would support this move and appointed von Papen on the 30th of May 1932. July and November 1932 elections. Von Papen called another election in July 1932. This election saw significant violence, with 100 people killed and 7,000 injured during the campaigning. The Nazi Party emerged as the largest party in the Reichstag, winning 230 seats. The SPD had 133 seats, the Centre Party had 97, and the Communist Party had 89. Despite the Nazi Party's success, Hindenburg refused to appoint Hitler as Chancellor due to his personal dislike for Hitler and the Nazi Party's violent tactics. Hoping to reduce the Nazi influence, von Papen called for another election in November 1932. The Nazis' share of the vote did fall slightly to 190 seats, but they remained the largest party. The Centre Party received fewer seats, leading von Papen to resign. Von Schleicher warned Hindenburg that Germany faced the threat of civil war if the political situation did not stabilise. Chancellorship of von Schleicher. In December 1932, Hindenburg appointed von Schleicher as Chancellor. However, von Schleicher had little support in the Reichstag. He tried to suspend the constitution and set up a military dictatorship, claiming that Hitler and von Papen were plotting against him, but his plan failed. Hitler's appointment as Chancellor. Von Papen suggested that Hitler be made Chancellor with him as Vice-Chancellor. He believed they could control Hitler and limit his power by restricting the number of Nazis in the cabinet to 2. On the 30th of January 1933, Hindenburg reluctantly appointed Hitler as Chancellor, hoping that von Papen's plan would work. Von Papen confidently stated, "Within 2 months, we will have pushed Hitler so far into a corner that he'll squeak like a mouse." Despite these attempts to control him, Hitler quickly consolidated power, leading to the establishment of a totalitarian regime in Germany. This period therefore marked the beginning of the end for the Weimar Republic and the rise of Nazi Germany. In summary, Hindenburg, von Schleicher and von Papen preferred authoritarian leadership, believing they could control Hitler, which proved a major miscalculation. In the 1932 presidential elections, Hindenburg won against Hitler with 53% of the vote, but Hitler's popularity continued growing, alarming conservative elites. Brüning resigned in May 1932, replaced by von Papen, who sought Nazi support, leading to elections where Nazis gained power. The Nazis won 230 seats in July 1932, but Hitler was denied the chancellorship. In November 1932, they lost some seats but remained the largest party. Hindenburg appointed von Schleicher as Chancellor in December 1932. With little support, von Schleicher tried but failed to establish a dictatorship. On the 30th of January 1933, Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor with von Papen as Vice-Chancellor, mistakenly believing Hitler could be controlled. Creation of a dictatorship, 1933 to 34. In this video, we are looking at the events of 1933 to 34 and the methods used by Hitler and the Nazis to transform Germany from a democracy into a dictatorship. When Hitler became Chancellor of Germany on the 30th of January 1933, he did not have complete control over the country. Germany was still a democracy governed by the Weimar Constitution. President Hindenburg retained the authority to dismiss him, and the majority of Reichstag members were not part of the Nazi Party. However, within just 18 months, Hitler transformed Germany into a dictatorship under his rule. This was achieved through a series of steps. 1. February 1933. Hitler calls a new election. Hitler called for an election to be held on the 5th of March 1933, hoping to gain a majority in the Reichstag. To ensure the Nazis' success, thousands of communists, socialists, and other political opponents were arrested and imprisoned. The SA was used to break up meetings of other political parties, creating fear and chaos. Newspapers that did not support the Nazis were shut down, ensuring only pro-Nazi messages were heard. And a massive propaganda campaign was launched, including posters, rallies, and speeches to promote Nazi ideas and discredit their opponents. 2. The 27th of February 1933, the Reichstag fire. Just a week before the election, the Reichstag building was set on fire. A Dutch communist named Marinus van der Lubbe was found at the scene with matches. He confessed to starting the fire and was executed, although there is significant doubt about his responsibility. Some historians believe the Nazis may have set him up or started a fire themselves to create a crisis they could exploit. Nonetheless, Hitler and Hermann Göring, the new Nazi chief of police, used the fire to claim there was a communist plot to overthrow the government. This led to the arrest of 4,000 communists on the night of the fire. 3. The 28th of February 1933, the Emergency Decree. The day after the Reichstag fire, Hitler convinced President Hindenburg to pass an emergency decree using Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution. Called the Decree for the Protection of the People and the State, it gave the police the power to search homes without warrant and the authority to arrest and imprison people without trial. This decree effectively suspended many civil liberties and allowed the Nazis to target their political enemies more aggressively. 4. The 5th of March 1933, election result. In the March 1933 election, the Nazis gained more votes, securing 288 seats in the Reichstag, which was 44% of the total. Although this was the highest number of seats, it was still not a majority. 5. The 24th of March 1933, the Enabling Act. Using the emergency powers granted by the Reichstag fire decree, Hitler prevented Communist Party members from taking their seats in the Reichstag. He also convinced other political parties to support him. The Nationalist Party agreed due to their shared beliefs, while the Centre Party backed Hitler after he promised to protect the Catholic Church. With this support, Hitler secured a majority in the Reichstag and then passed the Enabling Act, granting him the authority to make laws without the Reichstag's approval. The vote was 444 in favour and 94 against, with SA and SS members intimidating politicians during the voting process. The Enabling Act was initially supposed to last 4 years, but was renewed in 1937. During Hitler's rule, the Reichstag met only 12 more times, merely to listen to his speeches. This effectively marked the end of the Weimar Constitution and democracy in Germany. With his new powers, Hitler systematically eliminated opposition, targeting local governments, trade unions, and other political parties. 6. The 7th of April 1933, Nazi control of local government. The Nazis took control of all local governments, councils, and police forces in Germany. They passed a law that allowed them to remove officials who did not support the Nazis and replace them with loyal followers. This ensured that local governments were filled with people who would enforce Nazi policies. The Nazis also created the Gestapo, a secret police force with the power to arrest and imprison anyone without a trial. This made it easy for the Nazis to eliminate opposition and create a climate of fear. On the same day, they opened the first concentration camp at Dachau for political prisoners, where they imprisoned communists, socialists, and other opponents. This allowed the Nazis to detain and remove anyone who opposed them. 7. The 2nd of May 1933, banning trade unions. Trade unions were banned and their leaders were arrested. Hitler targeted trade unions because many of their members had communist sympathies, and workers often displayed greater loyalty to their unions than to the government. By eliminating the trade unions, Hitler aimed to dismantle potential sources of opposition and consolidate control over the working class. In place of the banned trade unions, workers were compelled to join the German Workers' Front, Deutsche Arbeitsfront or DAF, an organisation controlled by the Nazis. The DAF aimed to control the workforce, suppress opposition, and promote Nazi ideology among workers, ensuring that their loyalty lay solely with the regime. 8. The 14th of July 1933, one-party state. All political parties except the Nazi Party were banned. The law against the formation of new parties stated that anyone attempting to form a new party would be imprisoned for 3 years. This law made Germany a one-party state, with the Nazis having complete control over political life. 9. The 30th of June 1934, the Night of the Long Knives. Causes. Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA, wanted to merge the SA's 3 million members with the German army and take charge of the combined force. This alarmed both Hitler and the army leaders because it threatened to disrupt the military structure and potentially challenge Hitler's authority. Additionally, there were rumours that Röhm was planning to seize power from Hitler. To secure the support of the army and big business, Hitler decided to eliminate this threat. Event. On the 30th of June 1934, Hitler arranged a meeting of SA leaders in the Bavarian town of Bad Wiessee. Before dawn, Hitler and the SS, led by Heinrich Himmler, stormed the hotel where Röhm and other key SA leaders were staying. They were arrested and imprisoned. Over the next few days, about 400 people were killed in the purge, including former Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher and other perceived threats to Hitler's powers. This violent crackdown became known as the Night of the Long Knives. Consequences. The Night of the Long Knives removed many potential threats to Hitler's power. The SS emerged as the primary force responsible for Hitler's security, while the SA was significantly weakened and lost its political influence. Hitler's openness about the violence demonstrated that the Nazi regime was based on terror and murder. This purge consolidated Hitler's control over the military and removed many of his potential rivals, further entrenching his dictatorship and demonstrating the lengths he would go to maintain power. Key individual: Ernst Röhm. Early life. Röhm was born in November 1887 in Munich. He pursued a career in the military and rose to the rank of captain during the First World War, where he proved himself as a capable soldier. Post-war activities. After the war, Röhm joined the Free Corps, and the General Staff of the German Army used him to gather information on opposition groups. The German Workers' Party. Röhm's life took a significant turn when he was tasked with recruiting Hitler to infiltrate the German Workers' Party. Impressed by Hitler's powerful speaking skills, Röhm not only joined the party, but also became close friends with Hitler. Together they helped transform the German Workers' Party into the Nazi Party. Röhm played a crucial role in forming the SA, and in 1923 participated in the failed Munich Putsch. He was arrested and jailed for his role, but was released on probation. Tensions with Hitler. Röhm's private life was controversial and conflicted with Nazi ideals. He was a heavy drinker and openly homosexual, which concerned many members of the Nazi Party, as these traits were at odds with the party's strict moral code. As the SA grew in power, tensions developed between Röhm and Hitler. Röhm believed that the SA should become a major force of revolution, which clashed with Hitler's plans to consolidate power and gain support of the regular army. This conflict culminated in the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934. Röhm was arrested and taken to Stadelheim prison, where an SS leader left a pistol with a single bullet in his cell, encouraging him to commit suicide. When no sound was heard after 15 minutes, Röhm was shot by the SS. Aftermath. Röhm had been featured in a 1933 Nazi propaganda film, The Victory of Faith, but after his death, Hitler ordered all copies of the film to be destroyed to erase Röhm's presence from Nazi history. Just before his death, Röhm famously remarked, "All revolutions devour their own children," reflecting on the brutal nature of political power struggles. 10. The 2nd of August 1934, Hitler becomes Führer. On the 2nd of August 1934, President Hindenburg died. This provided Hitler with a chance to take complete control of Germany. Instead of allowing a new president to be elected, Hitler combined the roles of Chancellor and President, declaring himself Führer, the leader of Germany. This meant that Hitler was now both the head of the government and the head of state. To secure his power, Hitler made the German army swear an oath of loyalty directly to him, rather than to Germany. This oath meant that the army's allegiance was to Hitler personally, ensuring their support and preventing any military opposition against him. To make his new position official, Hitler held a plebiscite, or public vote, on the 19th of August 1934. The vote was influenced by Nazi propaganda and the fear instilled by the regime. Despite these pressures, the results showed that 90% of voters approved the changes. This public support gave Hitler's actions a sense of legitimacy. By merging the roles of Chancellor and President and securing the loyalty of the army, Hitler established total control over Germany. This marked the end of democracy in Germany and the beginning of the Third Reich, a period where Nazi ideology ruled and opposition was eliminated. Grade 9 Knowledge: The workings of government in Nazi Germany. In Nazi Germany, the government operated in a unique and often chaotic manner centered around Hitler's overall vision and ideology. Hitler's leadership style. Hitler as the Führer provided the overarching vision and direction for the country. However, he was not deeply involved in the day-to-day decision-making processes. His leadership style was haphazard and lacked discipline. He often stayed up late watching films, going to bed in the early hours of the morning and waking up late. Much of his time was spent eating, walking, and making long, rambling speeches to his followers, rather than focusing on detailed policy discussions. Hitler was frequently away from the government's central offices in Berlin. He preferred to stay at his mountain retreat, the Berghof, which was built from the profits of his book Mein Kampf. He'd lived there since 1928 and spent increasing amounts of time there, especially after 1938. This retreat provided him with a place to relax and entertain guests, further distancing himself from the direct governance of the country. Policy development. The detailed policies were created by those around Hitler. High-ranking officials and ministers interpreted Hitler's vision and turned it into concrete policies and actions. They used his general guidelines to develop specific plans and implement them. This often led to a chaotic and competitive environment among the Nazi leaders, each trying to gain favour by best aligning with Hitler's perceived intentions. Foreign policy. From 1938 onwards, Hitler's main focus shifted towards foreign policy. He was less involved in public appearances and internal government matters, concentrating on his ambitions for expanding Germany's territory and influence. This shift meant that domestic policies and decisions were largely left to his subordinates. Government structure. The Nazi government was highly centralised, but also marked by overlapping jurisdictions and responsibilities. Different agencies and leaders often had competing authorities, leading to inefficiency and power struggles. Despite this, the regime maintained strict control over society through propaganda, censorship, and a powerful secret police. In summary, Hitler called for elections on the 5th of March 1933, using propaganda, violence by the SA, and imprisonment of opponents to increase Nazi votes. After the Reichstag fire in February 1933, Hitler used it to justify arresting communists and convinced President Hindenburg to pass an emergency decree suspending civil liberties. In March 1933, Hitler passed the Enabling Act, allowing him to make laws without Reichstag approval, marking the end of democracy in Germany. By mid-1933, Hitler banned all political parties and trade unions, establishing Germany as a one-party state. Hitler ordered the purge of SA leaders and political opponents in June 1934, consolidating his power. After President Hindenburg's death in August 1934, Hitler combined the roles of President and Chancellor to become Führer, making him the undisputed leader of Germany, with the army swearing an oath of loyalty to him. The police state. In this video, we are looking at the role of the SS, the SD, and the Gestapo, the establishment of concentration camps, and Nazi control of the legal system. Once Hitler became the undisputed leader of Germany, he needed to ensure that the Nazis would remain in power indefinitely. To achieve this, he established a totalitarian regime where the government controlled all aspects of people's lives and ruthlessly eliminated any opposition. This transformation into a police state was achieved through a combination of terror and the extensive use of police forces. In 1936, the various police forces in Germany were unified under the command of Heinrich Himmler. This consolidation brought together the SS, the SD, and the Gestapo, creating a powerful and coordinated apparatus of state control and terror. These forces worked alongside each other to enforce Nazi policies and eliminate opposition. The SS. The SS was initially established in 1925 as Hitler's personal bodyguard. From 1932, SS members wore a distinctive black uniform with a silver badge, making them easily recognisable. The SS quickly became the most feared organisation in Germany, and it grew to 240,000 men by the late 1930s. Himmler was very selective about recruitment, requiring members to be racially and morally pure according to Nazi ideology. The SS was divided into three main sections. The SD. Led by Reinhard Heydrich, the SD was responsible for security. They had the power to arrest, detain, and execute anyone without trial, creating an environment of fear and oppression. The Waffen-SS. This elite unit served as a special branch within the army, known for their combat prowess and loyalty to Nazi ideals. The Death's Head units. These units were responsible for running the concentration camps and later the extermination camps. They played a central role in the implementation of the Holocaust. Key individual, Heinrich Himmler. Early life. Himmler was born in October 1900, the son of a school teacher. At the age of 18, in 1918, he joined the officer cadets, showing early signs of his interest in military affairs. He was deeply affected by Germany's defeat in the First World War, which left him bitter and nationalistic. Involvement with the Nazi Party. Himmler participated in the Munich Putsch in 1923. Although the coup failed, it solidified his commitment to the Nazi cause. After an unsuccessful stint as a poultry farmer, Himmler became increasingly involved in the Nazi Party's activities. Rise to power. In 1929, Himmler was appointed head of the SS. Under his leadership, the SS grew significantly in power and scope. In 1933, after the Nazis came to power, Himmler took control of the Bavarian police. Over the next 3 years, he consolidated power, becoming Chief of German Police and Reich Leader SS, which put all of Germany's police and security forces under his command. Role in the Third Reich. Himmler was responsible for running the concentration camps and played a central role in the implementation of the Holocaust, overseeing the systematic genocide of 6 million Jewish people and millions of others. He also expanded the Waffen-SS, the armed wing of the SS, which became a powerful military force, rivaling the traditional German army, the Wehrmacht. Death. As the Second World War was coming to an end in April 1945, Himmler attempted to negotiate an armistice with the Western Allies, hoping to save himself and the SS. Hitler discovered this betrayal and dismissed him from all his positions. Himmler was later captured by the Allies in May 1945, and on the 23rd of May, he committed suicide to avoid standing trial for his crimes. Gestapo. The Gestapo, also led by Reinhard Heydrich, functioned as the Nazi secret police. They had the authority to search anyone's home, spy on people, tap phones, and open mail without any legal restrictions. By 1942, the Gestapo had expanded to 30,000 officers. The Gestapo relied heavily on informants, ordinary people who reported suspicions about their friends, neighbours, and colleagues. The main weapon of the Gestapo was fear, ensuring that people were too terrified to oppose the regime. Grade 9 knowledge. The Gestapo. While the Gestapo is often portrayed as an all-powerful and terrifying force, many historians believe that its power was significantly overstated and relied more on popular consent and cooperation from the public rather than sheer terror. Limited personnel. Despite its fearsome reputation, the Gestapo had relatively few officers. For example, in 1937, the city of Düsseldorf had only 281 Gestapo agents to cover a population of 4 million people. At its peak, the entire Gestapo force across Germany numbered only about 30,000 officers. Many of these officers were not field agents but office workers, responsible for paperwork and administrative tasks. Public cooperation. The Gestapo's limited resources were significantly bolstered by cooperation from ordinary citizens. Studies have shown that a substantial portion of Gestapo investigations began with voluntary denunciations from the public. In some areas, over half of the investigations stemmed from tips provided by the public, and in some cases this figure was as high as 80%. Motivations for denunciations. It is likely that many of these denunciations were driven by personal grievances rather than genuine support for Nazi ideology. For instance, an individual might report a neighbour out of spite or personal conflict, rather than out of loyalty to the Nazi regime. This reliance on public cooperation meant that the Gestapo's effectiveness was partly due to actions of ordinary people rather than the omnipresence of its agents. Operations and methods. The Gestapo focused on identifying and eliminating opposition to the Nazi regime. They monitored political opponents, dissenters, and anyone suspected of undermining the state. Methods included surveillance, interrogation, and intimidation. However, the fear of being reported by neighbours or colleagues often kept people in line more effectively than direct intervention by Gestapo agents. Concentration camps. Initially, concentration camps were established to imprison political opponents. Over time, they developed into a vast network of camps used to detain and brutalise a wide range of individuals. Inmates were subjected to harsh conditions, forced labour and torture. The SS ran these camps, and it is estimated that over 200,000 Germans were imprisoned for showing opposition to the Nazis. The camps also held undesirables, such as homosexuals, prostitutes, minority groups, and political prisoners. The legal system. Under Nazi rule, Germans could be arrested and imprisoned without trial. The Nazis established a new central court called the People's Court and created special courts across Germany. Judges in these courts were expected to follow Nazi policies strictly. There were no juries and defendants had no right to appeal. These courts were responsible for the sentencing and execution of many opponents of the Nazi regime, further ensuring that any resistance was swiftly and brutally crushed. In summary, Heinrich Himmler unified the SS, SD and Gestapo, creating a powerful system of control to enforce Nazi rule and eliminate opposition. Originally Hitler's bodyguard, the SS became a feared force, with divisions like the Waffen-SS and Death's Head units responsible for running concentration and extermination camps. The Gestapo had broad powers to spy on, arrest, and detain people without trial. They used fear and relied on informants to suppress opposition. Initially for political prisoners, concentration camps expanded to imprison Jewish people, minorities, and others considered undesirable. Nazi courts, like the People's Court, had no juries, and judges strictly followed Nazi policies. Opponents were arrested, imprisoned, and often executed without a fair trial. Through the police state, the Nazis used terror to maintain power, ensuring that any resistance was crushed swiftly and brutally. Controlling and influencing attitudes. In this video, we are looking at the use of censorship and propaganda and Nazi control of culture and the arts. After Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, the Nazi Party quickly established a regime that relied heavily on censorship and propaganda, in addition to terror, to gain and maintain control over the country. The Nazis understood the power of controlling information and used these tools to shape public opinion and ensure widespread support for their policies. Key individual: Joseph Goebbels. Early life. Born in 1897, Goebbels was unable to fight in the First World War due to a disability in his foot, which left him with a limp. This disability steered him towards academics, and he became an accomplished scholar, earning a doctorate in philosophy from Heidelberg University in 1921. Joining the Nazi Party. Goebbels joined the Nazi Party in 1922, drawn to its nationalistic and anti-Semitic ideologies. Initially, he wasn't a strong supporter of Hitler and even had reservations about his leadership. However, his views changed dramatically after attending the Bamberg Conference in 1926, where he was deeply impressed by Hitler's vision and charisma. From that point on, Goebbels became one of Hitler's most devoted followers. Head of propaganda. By 1930, Goebbels had risen to become the head of propaganda for the Nazi Party. He was instrumental in coordinating the party's election campaigns, using innovative techniques to gain public support. His strategies included organising large-scale rallies, creating persuasive posters, and producing films that glorified the Nazi cause. Minister of Enlightenment and Propaganda. In 1933, Goebbels was appointed Minister of Enlightenment and Propaganda. In this role, he had vast control over the media, sports, culture, and the arts. Goebbels was skilled at using propaganda to manipulate public opinion. He employed the technique of repeating simple, powerful messages accompanied by striking images to subtly influence people's thoughts and attitudes. Goebbels was not only a master of propaganda, but also a powerful public speaker. His speeches were crafted to inspire and mobilize the masses, reinforcing Nazi policies and ideals. Censorship and propaganda. The Nazis used censorship and propaganda to control what the German people thought and believed, ensuring they supported Nazi policies. Censorship is the act of suppressing or prohibiting any parts of books, films, or news, etc., that are considered politically unacceptable, while propaganda is information, especially biased or misleading, used to promote a political cause or point of view. Examples of censorship and propaganda include films. Goebbels had to approve all film plots. This control ensured that movies promoted Nazi ideas and values. Films often glorified Hitler and the Nazi Party, or depicted their enemies, particularly Jewish people, in a negative light. Popular films included Triumph of the Will, which showcased a Nazi rally, and The Eternal Jew, which spread anti-Semitic ideas. Mass rallies. Mass rallies were a significant part of Nazi propaganda. These rallies were often held to celebrate Hitler and the Nazi Party. Special arenas were built for these events, with the Nuremberg rallies being the largest and most famous. These rallies were spectacular, featuring torches, banners, and choreographed displays designed to showcase the power and glory of Nazi Germany. The rallies aimed to inspire and unite the German people under Nazi ideology, creating a sense of excitement and belonging among the attendees. Newspapers. The Nazis tightly controlled the press to ensure that only stories supporting their regime were published. Any newspapers that tried to print unapproved stories were shut down. All newspaper owners, editors, and journalists had to be members of the Reich Press Chamber, ensuring they followed Nazi guidelines. This meant there was no free press in Nazi Germany, and the government controlled all information available to the public. Newspapers were filled with positive reports about Nazi achievements and negative stories about their enemies, especially Jewish people and communists. Radio. The Nazis controlled all radio stations in Germany. In 1934, all radio stations were unified under the Reich Radio Company. To ensure that people could only listen to Nazi-approved broadcasts, cheap, short-range radios were produced that could not pick up foreign stations. By 1939, 70% of German households owned a radio, making it a powerful tool for Nazi propaganda. Loudspeakers were also placed in public areas, such as cafes, restaurants, and workplaces, to broadcast Nazi messages and speeches. This widespread access to radio meant that Hitler's speeches and other propaganda could reach millions of people easily. Culture and the arts. In 1933, the Nazis set up an organisation called the Reich Chamber of Culture, led by Goebbels. This organisation was created to control all aspects of culture and the arts in Germany. Every musician, writer, artist and actor had to join. People who were considered undesirable, especially Jewish people, were banned from participating. The Reich Chamber of Culture made sure that all forms of cultural expression, such as art, theatre, music, film and literature, supported Nazi beliefs and policies. This meant that artists and creators could only produce works that promoted Nazi ideas, like the superiority of the Aryan race, German nationalism, and anti-Semitism. Anything that didn't fit these ideas was censored or banned. By controlling culture and the arts so strictly, the Nazis aimed to influence how people thought and felt, ensuring their propaganda reached every part of German life. This was done in the following ways. Art. Art that had been popular in Weimar Germany, like the works of Otto Dix, which showcased the harsh realities of everyday life, was banned. The Nazis labelled modern art styles such as Expressionism, Cubism and Surrealism as degenerate because they did not conform to the classical ideas of beauty and Aryan purity. In 1936, 5,000 disapproved paintings were burned. The Nazis favoured art that depicted healthy, happy German figures, idyllic family scenes, and heroic images of Hitler. This type of art was used to promote the ideal Aryan lifestyle and the glory of the Nazi regime. Cinema. Cinema was very popular in Nazi Germany. Goebbels read and approved all film scripts to ensure they carried a pro-Nazi message. Films were a powerful tool for spreading Nazi propaganda, and Goebbels made sure they portrayed the regime positively and its enemies negatively. Before the main feature, a 45-minute newsreel would be shown, highlighting Hitler's achievements and spreading Nazi propaganda. These newsreels were designed to glorify Nazi successes and instill a sense of pride and loyalty among viewers. Design. The Bauhaus movement, known for its modern and practical designs using new technology, was shut down in 1933. Its founder, Walter Gropius, fled Germany and lived in exile for 30 years. Hitler preferred public buildings to be grand and strong, modelled after ancient Greek or Roman architecture and adorned with Nazi symbols. These designs were intended to convey the power and permanence of the Nazi regime. One of Hitler's favourite architects was Albert Speer, who designed major structures, including the parade ground at Nuremberg. Speer's monumental architecture was intended to awe and inspire the German people, reinforcing the regime's strength and unity. Literature. Goebbels compiled a list of banned books that were removed from shops and libraries. These included works by Jewish authors, communists, and others deemed undesirable by the regime. Mein Kampf, written by Hitler, became the best-selling book in Nazi Germany. Books that had been popular during the Weimar Republic, such as Erich Remarque's anti-war novel, All Quiet on the Western Front, were banned for their pacifist and critical views of war. From 1933 to 1945, about 2,500 writers left Germany to escape persecution. Public book burnings were organised, where millions of books from universities and libraries were destroyed. In May 1933, students in Berlin burned 20,000 books, including those by Sigmund Freud and Albert Einstein. These events were highly symbolic and aimed to show the Nazis' rejection of intellectualism and free thought. Music. The Nazis promoted German or Austrian music, particularly classical composers like Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and Wagner, who were celebrated for their contributions to German culture. Traditional folk music was also encouraged, as it was seen as a representation of pure German heritage. In contrast, music by Jewish composers such as Mendelssohn was banned. American jazz music was prohibited because it was associated with African American culture, which the Nazis considered inferior. The regime aimed to cleanse German music of any foreign influences and ensure it reflected their racial ideologies. Sport. The Nazis used success in sports to promote their regime and the supposed superiority of the German race. Sporting events were a source of national pride and a powerful propaganda tool. The regime organised these events to showcase the physical strength and discipline of the Aryan race. All teams, including those from abroad, were required to give the straight-armed Nazi salute during the German national anthem at sporting events. This was a symbolic act of obedience and respect towards the Nazi regime. Even the England football team, when they played a match in Berlin in 1938, had to give the Nazi salute, showing the extent of Nazi influence. The 1936 Olympic Games, held in Berlin, were a major propaganda event for the Nazis. They saw the Olympics as a chance to show the world how strong, unified, and modern Germany was. A new stadium was built to hold 110,000 people, making it the largest in the world at that time. The stadium and other Olympic facilities were designed to impress both German citizens and international visitors. The Games were hugely popular, attracting massive crowds and significant international attention. Germany's performance was outstanding, topping the medal table with 33 gold medals. The Nazis used the success to promote their idea of Aryan superiority and physical excellence. However, a key moment of the Games came from an American athlete, Jesse Owens. Owens, a black American, won 4 gold medals in track and field events. His victories challenged Nazi racial theories and were a powerful counter to the Nazi claim of Aryan superiority, even though the regime tried to downplay his achievements. The famous filmmaker, Leni Riefenstahl, who supported the Nazis, was asked to film the Olympic Games. She used new technology and techniques, like slow-motion cameras, to capture athletes' movement in detail. Her films, especially Olympia, were visually impressive and portrayed the Games in a way that highlighted the efficiency and organisation of the Nazi regime. These films were used as propaganda to show German strength and inspire pride among the German people. Theatre. Theatre productions had to focus on German history and politics, glorifying the Nazi regime. Plays that promoted Nazi values and depicted German heroes were encouraged. Cabaret clubs, which had been popular in Weimar Germany for their liberal and often satirical performances, were closed down as they did not align with Nazi values. These clubs were seen as promoting decadent and immoral behaviour, which the Nazis wanted to eliminate from German society. In summary, the Nazis used censorship and propaganda to control public opinion. All media promoted Nazi ideas and prevented any opposing views from being shared with the public. Joseph Goebbels, as propaganda minister, had full control over German culture, media and art. He spread powerful messages to glorify the Nazis and demonise their opponents. Goebbels approved all films. Rallies showcased Nazi power, using impressive displays to inspire unity and loyalty among Germans. The Nazis controlled all newspapers and radio stations. Cheap radios and loudspeakers in public spaces ensured Nazi messages reached most Germans. The Nazis controlled art, music, literature and design, ensuring that all forms of expression reflected Nazi beliefs. And the Nazis used sports, particularly the 1936 Berlin Olympics, to showcase German strength and racial superiority. Nazi policies towards the churches. In this video, we are looking at Nazi control of the Catholic and Protestant churches and the impact of Nazi policies. Another aspect of life in Germany that Hitler wanted to control was the Christian churches. There were obvious differences and potential clashes between Christianity and Nazism. Christianity preached peace, love, and tolerance, while Nazism promoted violence, strength, and racial superiority. These opposing values made it difficult for the two to coexist. Although some Christians did support the Nazis, especially in the early years due to their fear of communism, which was anti-religious, and Hitler's promise to eradicate it, they also found common ground in certain values. For example, both Nazis and Christians believed in the importance of marriage, family, and traditional morals. Initially, Hitler promised the churches that they would be respected and their rights protected. He aimed to reassure Christians and avoid immediate conflict with the church, which had significant influence over many Germans. However, this promise did not last long. The Catholic Church. 1/3 of Germans were Catholic, and Hitler was concerned that Catholics owed their allegiance to the Pope as the head of the Catholic Church, rather than to him. Catholic schools, which taught different values from Nazi state schools, further reduced Nazi influence. This made Hitler eager to increase his control over the Catholic Church. In July 1933, Hitler reached a concordat with the Pope. According to this agreement, Hitler promised freedom of worship for Catholics and pledged not to interfere in Catholic schools. In return, the Pope agreed that the Catholic Church in Germany would stay out of politics. Additionally, German bishops had to swear loyalty to the Nazi regime. However, this agreement did not last. In schools, crucifixes were removed and replaced with pictures of Hitler. Catholic newspapers were censored, and Nazi propaganda spread rumours of financial corruption within the church. In 1937, Pope Pius XI issued a statement called Mit brennender Sorge, with burning anxiety, criticising the Nazi regime and declaring that Nazism was hostile to Christ and his church. This statement was read out in Catholic churches, prompting a strong reaction from the Nazis, including reducing state funding for the church, having the Gestapo and the SS spy on church organisations, bringing Catholic schools in line with state schools or closing them, banning Catholic youth activities, and arresting Catholic priests who spoke out against the regime, with some being sent to concentration camps. Through these actions, the Nazis tried to undermine the Catholic Church's influence and ensure that loyalty to Hitler and Nazi ideology came first. The Protestant Church. 2/3 of Germans were Protestant, and the Nazis aimed to control this significant portion of the population. In 1933, Protestants who favoured working with the Nazis formed the Reich Church. It was led by Ludwig Müller, whom Hitler appointed as the Reich Bishop of Germany. Protestants who supported the Nazis were allowed to continue their church services and even displayed the swastika in their churches. The Reich Church adopted many Nazi ideologies, including banning Jewish people from being baptized. Some Christians in the Reich Church wore Nazi uniforms and used the slogan, "the swastika on our chests and the cross in our hearts," symbolizing their dual loyalty to Nazism and Christianity. Not all Protestants accepted Nazi control. A group of pastors led by Martin Niemöller and Dietrich Bonhoeffer set up the Pastors' Emergency League, or PEL, to campaign against the Nazi regime's interference in the church. They opposed the Reich Church's policies and actions, which conflicted with Christian teachings. However, their resistance came at a high cost. In 1937, Niemöller was arrested and sent to a concentration camp, and the PEL was eventually banned. Through these efforts, the Nazis attempted to bring the Protestant Church under their control, ensuring that religious teachings and practices aligned with Nazi ideology. Despite resistance, the regime sought to suppress any opposition and integrate the church into their totalitarian state. Overall impact. These actions by the Nazis effectively reduced religious opposition and brought the churches under their control. By promoting a version of Christianity that matched their beliefs and punishing those who resisted, the Nazis managed to weaken the church's influence over the German people. By 1939, only 5% of Germans described themselves as God believers, showing how Nazi propaganda and policies had made society less religious and eroded traditional Christian beliefs. In summary, Christianity promoted peace and tolerance, while Nazism emphasised violence and racial superiority, causing tensions. Hitler initially promised to respect the churches to avoid conflict, as both Nazis and Christians shared values like family and traditional morals. Hitler signed a 1933 agreement with the Pope promising religious freedom, but later broke it by censoring Catholic newspapers, banning youth activities, and imprisoning opposing priests. In 1937, Pope Pius XI criticised the Nazis, prompting retaliation through reduced funding, spying on church groups, and closing Catholic schools. The Nazis formed the Reich Church, promoting Nazi ideology within Protestantism. Some Protestants resisted and faced persecution. Nazi policies weakened religious influence, reducing church control and leading many Germans to distance from traditional Christian beliefs by 1939. Nazi policies towards women. In this video, we are looking at Nazi attitudes and policies towards women in Germany and the impact on women's lives. Nazi attitudes towards women. During the 1920s, women in Germany experienced increased opportunities and greater equality. The Weimar Constitution granted women the right to vote on the same terms as men and enshrined equality under the law. Many women found employment as civil servants and in professions such as medicine and education. Remarkably, 10% of the members of the Reichstag were women during this period. Female fashion also saw significant changes, with women wearing shorter skirts, trousers, and makeup. They could go out without an escort, reflecting their newfound independence and freedom. However, when the Nazis came to power in 1933, their attitudes towards women were starkly different. Hitler and the Nazi regime believed that women should adhere to the 3 Ks: Kinder, Küche, and Kirche, children, kitchen, and church. According to Hitler, women's primary role was to support the family and the state by focusing on child rearing, maintaining the household, and upholding traditional family values. This traditional role was viewed as their natural and proper place in society. Women under the Nazi regime were expected to have a natural look, which meant minimal use of makeup and a preference for modest traditional clothing. The Nazis did not treat women as equals to men and actively opposed the freedoms and opportunities that women had enjoyed during the Weimar years. The regime was particularly concerned about the falling birth rate. In 1900, there had been over 2 million births per year, but this number had dropped to under 1 million by 1933. The Nazis believed that a declining birth rate threatened their plans for expanding Germany and maintaining a strong, pure Aryan race. Nazi policies towards women. Appearance. The Nazis had strict ideas about how women should look. They were discouraged from smoking, wearing makeup, trousers, and high heels. Slimming was also discouraged because it was believed to negatively affect fertility and the ability to give birth. Nazi propaganda frequently depicted women in modest clothes, with their hair tied back, promoting a natural and traditional appearance. Education and training. The Nazis created organisations to train women in domestic skills. The German Women's League organised training courses in cooking, childcare, and healthy eating. By March 1939, 1.7 million women had attended these courses. Schoolgirls were trained for motherhood and taught domestic skills such as cooking and housework. In 1937, grammar schools for girls were banned, and the number of women entering higher education fell dramatically from 17,000 in 1932 to 6,000 in 1939. Employment. When the Nazis came to power, they quickly implemented policies to remove women from professional roles. Within months, many female doctors, teachers, and lawyers were sacked. By 1936, it was decreed that no woman could become a judge or participate in jury service. These measures were designed to reinforce traditional gender roles and ensure that men dominated the professional and public spheres. Family. Encouraging women to have children was a central policy for the Nazis. In 1933, the law for the encouragement of marriage provided loans of up to 1,000 marks, nearly a year's wages, to newly married couples on the condition that the woman gave up work. The more children a couple had, the more of the loan was forgiven. 1 child allowed for them to keep a quarter of the money, 2 children half, and 4 children meant the entire loan was written off. To further promote large families, contraception and abortion were banned. In 1938, the Nazis revised divorce laws to allow men to divorce their wives if they could not or would not have children. To celebrate and encourage motherhood, the Nazis introduced the annual award of the Motherhood Medal on the 12th of August, the birthday of Hitler's mother. This award recognised women with the most children. Mothers with 8 children received the Gold Cross. Those with 6 received silver, and those with 5 received bronze. The Hitler Youth were instructed to salute women wearing the gold medal as a sign of respect. Additionally, mothers of 10 children were expected to name Hitler as the godfather of their 10th child, and name the baby Adolf if it was a male, further intertwining family life with Nazi ideology. The Nazis also established the Lebensborn or Fountain of Life movement in 1935, aiming to expand the Aryan race by encouraging women to have children with SS men. This programme provided financial support and care to unmarried mothers, encouraging them to bear children who would be raised as loyal Nazis. Special maternity homes were set up for these women, ensuring their well-being during and after pregnancy. As a result of the Lebensborn movement, an estimated 8,000 children were born. However, not all women were encouraged to have children under Nazi rule. The Nazis implemented the Law for the Prevention of Diseased Offspring in 1933, which directed the forced sterilisation of women deemed unfit to reproduce. This law targeted women with a history of mental illness, hereditary diseases, or so-called antisocial behaviour. The regime believed that preventing these women from having children would help purify the Aryan race. Between 1934 and 1945, approximately 400,000 people were forcibly sterilised under this law. Impact of Nazi policies. The effectiveness of Nazi policies towards women had mixed results. On one hand, the birth rate did increase significantly. In 1933, 970,000 babies were born, and by 1939, this number had risen to 1,413,000. This rise in the birth rate was a success for the Nazis, as it aligned with their goal of increasing the Aryan population to support their expansionist and ideological aims. However, the Nazi policy towards women's employment faced significant challenges. As the rearmament programme grew, the demand for labour increased. This created a conflict with the Nazis' initial goal of keeping women out of the workforce and in traditional roles at home. As a result, the restrictions on women working had to be relaxed. By 1939, the number of women working was 50% higher than in 1933. indicating that the Nazis were unable to fully enforce their policies on female employment. Additionally, many women were unhappy with the Nazi policies, feeling that they were degrading and demeaning. The emphasis on traditional roles and the pressure to bear many children without personal choice or recognition of individual aspirations led to discontent among women. In summary, the Nazis promoted traditional roles for women, summarised by the slogan Kinder, Küche and Kirche, children, kitchen and church. Women were discouraged from wearing makeup, trousers, high heels or slimming. They were encouraged instead to adopt a natural look with modest clothing. Education for girls was focused on domestic skills and motherhood preparation. Many professional roles for women were restricted. The Nazis encouraged large families by offering marriage loans and the motherhood medal for women with many children. To maintain racial purity, forced sterilisation targeted women with mental illnesses, hereditary diseases, or antisocial behaviours. Despite an initial birth rate increase, labour shortages led to more women working by 1939. Many women felt restricted and dissatisfied with the limitations on their independence and personal choices. Nazi policies towards the young. In this video, we are looking at Nazi aims and policies, youth groups, and education. Nazi aims and policies towards the young. The Nazis had specific aims and policies directed at the youth of Germany. Hitler wanted to shape and control all aspects of a young person's life to ensure they would grow up to be loyal Nazis. This control was achieved through a process known as indoctrination, where children were taught Nazi ideals and beliefs, leaving little room for independent thought or dissent. Young people were encouraged to report anyone, including their teachers and parents, who criticised Hitler or the Nazi regime. This created a culture of fear and mistrust, ensuring that loyalty to Hitler was placed above family ties and personal relationships. In 1935, Hitler described the ideal young person as disciplined, healthy, and able to tolerate pain. The Nazis had different aims for boys and girls, tailored to fit their roles in the regime's vision for the future. Boys. Boys were prepared to become workers and soldiers. Physical education was a significant part of their schooling, and they participated in the Hitler Youth, where they engaged in activities that promoted military skills and Nazi beliefs. Girls. Girls were prepared to be wives and mothers. They were taught skills needed for homemaking and raising children, reinforcing the idea that their primary role was to support their husbands and raise the next generation of loyal Nazis. Youth groups. The Nazis placed great importance on youth organisations to mould young Germans into loyal supporters of Nazi ideology. These groups were designed to indoctrinate children from an early age, ensuring they grew up with strong Nazi beliefs and values. The Hitler Youth Organisation was established in 1922. It was part of a broader effort to integrate Nazi principles into all aspects of life, including the upbringing of children. In 1933, after the Nazis came to power, all other youth groups in Germany were banned. This move ensured that the Hitler Youth became the primary organisation for young people. In 1936, the law for the incorporation of German youth was passed, giving the Hitler Youth equal importance to a child's home and school life. This law integrated the youth organisation into the core of German society. By 1939, membership in the Hitler Youth was made compulsory. By this time, 8 million young people were members, making the organisation a significant force in Nazi Germany. Boys. Boys progressed through different stages in the Hitler Youth, each with increasing levels of training and commitment. Little fellows, ages 6 to 10. Boys would attend meetings several times a week. Young folk, ages 10 to 14. Training intensified with more focus on physical fitness and military skills. And the Hitler Youth, ages 14 to 18. Boys learned advanced military skills, attended political training sessions, and swore an oath of loyalty to Hitler. They also participated in regular camping expeditions and were taught about Nazi ideas. Girls. Girls also had a structured progression through the Nazi youth organisations. Young girls, ages 10 to 14. They learned basic domestic skills and the importance of physical fitness. and the League of German Maidens, ages 14 to 17. Training focused on preparing them to be good wives and mothers. They were taught how to cook, care for babies, and maintain racial hygiene, which included the need to marry only Aryan men. Girls also participated in political activities and swore oaths of allegiance to Hitler. Education. Curriculum. The Nazis introduced extensive education policies to ensure that children were indoctrinated to adopt Nazi beliefs and behaviours. Every subject in the curriculum was used to promote Nazi ideology. All textbooks had to be approved by Nazi officials to ensure they conformed to Nazi beliefs. This strict control over educational materials ensured that students were constantly exposed to Nazi propaganda. Geography. Lessons taught about the need for Lebensraum, or living space, justifying Germany's expansion into other territories. History. Children were taught about German military victories and the rise of the Nazis, portraying them as heroes who restored Germany's greatness. Maths. Problems included calculating the number of Jewish aliens in Germany as a percentage of the population, or solving military-related problems like the distance for bombing attacks. Science. Lessons involved learning how to make weapons and other military technology, emphasising the importance of war and military strength. The amount of time dedicated to physical education doubled to increase the physical fitness of German youth, preparing boys for military service and girls for motherhood. A new subject, eugenics or race studies, was introduced to teach children about Nazi racial beliefs. This included the supposed superiority of the Aryan race and the inferiority of other races such as black people, Eastern Europeans and Jewish people. Although these ideas were unscientific and racist, they indoctrinated a generation of German children to believe they were inherently superior. Teachers. All teachers were required to join the German Teachers' League and swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler. Refusal to comply could result in dismissal. The Nazis also conducted political education courses for teachers, and by 1939 over 200,000 teachers had attended these courses. Teachers were expected to teach students how to perform the Nazi salute, start every lesson with Heil Hitler, and decorate their classrooms with Nazi flags and posters. University. The Nazis did not prioritise university education, and fewer people attended university after 1933. Between 1933 and 1934, 15% of university lecturers were replaced, 1/3 for racial reasons and half for political reasons. By 1939, 3,000 university staff had been dismissed. Many leading academics, including Albert Einstein, left the country due to these changes. University courses were also altered to reflect Nazi beliefs. For instance, physics courses excluded Einstein's theory of relativity because he was Jewish. In summary, the Nazis controlled the youth to ensure loyalty, using indoctrination and promoting reporting on dissent, even of family. Groups like the Hitler Youth and League of German Maidens became mandatory, focusing on military training for boys and homemaking for girls. Nazi ideology dominated all subjects. Textbooks required approval, promoting expansion, racial views, and military importance. PE time doubled to prepare boys for the army and girls for motherhood. A new subject, eugenics, taught racial purity and Aryan superiority, shaping children's views on race. Teachers had to join the German Teachers' League, swear loyalty to Hitler, and incorporate Nazi symbols and greetings in lessons. And university attendance declined under the Nazis, and many academics were dismissed for racial or political reasons. Nazi economic policies and living standards. In this video, we are looking at Nazi economic plans, the reduction of unemployment, and the standard of living. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, the German economy was in crisis. The Great Depression had a devastating impact on the country, leading to widespread unemployment and economic instability. Approximately 6 million people, about 25% of the labour force, were out of work. This high unemployment rate was a significant issue, as many families struggled to make ends meet. Additionally, the global economic downturn had caused a sharp decline in international trade, further worsening Germany's economic situation. The Nazis aimed to tackle these challenges by reducing unemployment and striving for economic self-sufficiency, known as autarky. The goal of autarky was to reduce Germany's reliance on other countries for essential raw materials such as iron, steel, and rubber. It was hoped that this would ensure that Germany's economy would be more stable and less vulnerable to external shocks like the Great Depression. During their election campaigns, the Nazis promised work and bread to the German people. This slogan symbolised their commitment to providing jobs and improving living conditions, resonating with the struggling German population and playing a crucial role in gaining support for their policies. Economic plans. The New Plan. The first major economic plan was introduced by Dr. Hjalmar Schacht, the Minister of the Economy. This plan, known as the New Plan, aimed to reduce imports and unemployment. Schacht's strategy involved signing trade deals with countries in South America and Southeast Europe. These agreements ensured that Germany received essential raw materials in exchange for German-made goods. However, the improvements under the new plan did not happen quickly enough for Hitler, so in 1936 he sacked Schacht and replaced him with Hermann Göring. The 4-Year Plan. From 1936, Hermann Göring was put in charge of the 4-Year Plan, which aimed to prepare Germany for war. The key goal of this plan was to make Germany self-sufficient in raw materials. German scientists were tasked with finding substitute materials or developing artificial substitutes. For example, they discovered ways to produce petrol from coal and coffee from acorns. To support the 4-year plan, a propaganda campaign was launched to persuade people to buy German products and consume only German food. Despite these efforts, the plan had limited success. By 1939, Germany was still importing 1/3 of its raw materials, indicating that the goal of complete self-sufficiency had not yet been fully achieved. Key individual: Hermann Göring. Early life. Göring was born in January 1893 in Bavaria. He showed an early interest in the military, which led him to join the German army. During the First World War, Göring became a celebrated fighter pilot, earning numerous decorations for bravery. Joining the Nazi Party. In 1922, Göring joined the Nazi Party, attracted by its nationalist and anti-communist rhetoric. He quickly became a close associate of Hitler. During the Munich Putsch, Göring was severely wounded. This event solidified his commitment to the Nazi cause and brought him even closer to Hitler. Political career. Göring was elected to the Reichstag, the German parliament, in 1928, representing the Nazi Party. By 1932, he had become its presiding officer, demonstrating his significant influence within the party. When the Nazis rose to power in 1933, Göring was appointed as one of the 3 Nazi ministers in the government. He played a crucial role in consolidating Nazi control, including orchestrating the Reichstag Fire Decree and the Enabling Act, which gave Hitler dictatorial powers. Lifestyle. Göring was known for his extravagant lifestyle. He lived in lavish homes, wore elaborate uniforms, and collected art and treasures. His love for luxury and opulence made him the subject of both admiration and ridicule. Many Germans joked about his excessive lifestyle, which stood in stark contrast to the austerity experienced by ordinary people. Roles in government. In 1935, Göring was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the newly established Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. Under his leadership, the Luftwaffe became a formidable force. In 1936, he was also made the Economic Director for Germany, in charge of the 4-year plan aimed at making Germany self-sufficient and preparing for war. Succession and decline. In 1939, Hitler named Göring as his official successor, recognising his loyalty and service to the Nazi cause. But Göring's influence began to decline as the war progressed. The Luftwaffe's failure to win the Battle of Britain in 1940 and its inability to stop the Royal Air Force's bombing raids on Germany marked significant military failures. These defeats diminished Göring's reputation and strained his relationship with Hitler. Post the Second World War. After the war, Göring was captured by Allied forces and tried at the Nuremberg trials, where he was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. He was sentenced to death by hanging. However, on the 15th of October 1946, the night before his execution, Göring committed suicide by ingesting cyanide. Reducing unemployment. In 1933, unemployment in Germany peaked at 6 million people. By 1939, this number had been reduced to 500,000. The Nazis used several methods to achieve this dramatic reduction in unemployment. Public works projects. One of the key methods was increasing spending on public works, a continuation of policies introduced by the governments of the Weimar Republic. These projects created numerous jobs, particularly in construction. Major projects included the building of autobahns or motorways, hospitals and schools. The Autobahn project alone provided work for nearly 100,000 people. Spending on public works grew significantly from 18 billion marks in 1933 to 37 billion marks in 1938, reflecting the scale of these efforts. Rearmament. Another significant method was rearmament. The Nazis drastically increased spending on arms from 3.5 billion marks in 1933 to 26 billion marks in 1939. This created jobs in factories and related industries. Additionally, the expansion of the army played a crucial role. The army grew from 100,000 men in 1933 to 1,360,000 men by 1939, following the introduction of conscription in 1935. All men aged between 18 and 25 were required to join the armed forces for 2 years, further reducing unemployment. The National Labour Service, or the RAD. The National Labour Service was established to organise unemployed people into manual labour roles, such as repairing roads, planting forests, and digging drainage ditches. From 1935, all men aged between 18 and 25 were required to join the RAD for 6 months. Although it was not popular due to the uniforms, camp living conditions, and low pay, it effectively reduced unemployment by providing work. Extent of success. While the Nazis made significant strides in reducing unemployment, several limitations and factors meant their success was not as comprehensive as it appeared. These factors include the concept of invisible unemployment, which refers to people who are excluded from the official unemployment statistics, such as women. Women were not included in the Nazis' unemployment figures. This exclusion masked the true extent of unemployment, since many women were still out of work or were forced out of jobs to make way for men. Jewish people. Jewish people were also excluded from unemployment statistics. As the Nazis implemented increasingly discriminatory policies, many Jewish people lost their jobs and were not counted in the unemployment data. Members of the RAD. Men who were part of the National Labour Service were not counted as unemployed, despite the fact that their work was often temporary and low paid. This artificially reduced the unemployment numbers. Temporary and part-time workers. Workers who were only temporarily employed, such as those in seasonal agricultural jobs, were classified as being in full employment. Similarly, part-time workers were counted as full-time employees, which skewed the unemployment figures. Prisoners and concentration camp inmates. Hundreds of thousands of people were imprisoned or sent to concentration camps. These individuals were not included in unemployment statistics, further masking the true unemployment rate. The Nazis' efforts to reduce unemployment faced significant challenges in terms of long-term sustainability and economic stability. By 1939, 1.3 million men were conscripted into the armed forces. While this significantly reduced unemployment, it presented a major limitation. Such a large military force would not be necessary during peacetime, making this employment strategy unsustainable in the long term. Additionally, the extensive government spending on rearmament and public works projects, which created numerous jobs, relied heavily on borrowing. This approach was not sustainable in the long term, as the high levels of spending could not be maintained indefinitely without causing severe economic problems. Thus, while the Nazis were able to reduce unemployment in the short term, their methods posed significant risks for future economic stability. Standard of living. The standard of living is a measure of whether people's lives are getting better or worse, which can be difficult to determine as it varies from person to person. Efforts were made between 1933 to 39 to improve the standard of living in Germany, but the results were mixed. Employment and income. Between 1933 and 1939, the increase in employment suggested an improvement in the standard of living for many Germans, as more people secured regular incomes. However, not everyone benefited equally from these employment opportunities. For instance, individuals in the National Labour Service often found their jobs to be unappealing. Wages in Germany did improve under Nazi rule. In 1934, wages rose by 6% compared to the previous year. By 1936, wages had increased by 9%, and by 1939 they had risen by 20%. However, the extent of these increases varied significantly across different industries. For example, workers in the armaments industry saw larger wage increases due to the high demand for military production. Conversely, other sectors did not experience the same level of wage growth. The cost of living also rose during the 1930s, which affected the overall improvement in living standards. Food prices, for example, increased by 20% between 1933 and 1939. This rise in the cost of essential goods offset the wage increase for many workers, meaning that their improved wages did not necessarily translate into a better standard of living. In addition to rising costs, the average number of hours worked per week increased during this period. In 1933, the average work week was approximately 43 hours. By 1939, this had increased to around 49 hours per week. This increase in working hours meant that while more people were employed, they also had to work longer hours, which could affect their overall quality of life. Nazi organisations. The Nazis recognised the importance of maintaining worker satisfaction to ensure continued support and productivity. To achieve this, they established three main organisations that focused on different aspects of workers' lives. The German Labour Front, the DAF. Led by Dr. Robert Ley, the German Labour Front was created after the Nazis banned trade unions in 1933. The DAF aimed to protect workers' rights and improve working conditions. Unlike traditional trade unions, both employers and employees were members of the DAF. This organisation sought to balance the interests of workers and employers, fostering a cooperative working environment. The DAF played a crucial role in implementing various programmes designed to enhance the quality of life for German workers. Strength Through Joy, or KDF. The Strength Through Joy programme was an initiative under the DAF that organised leisure activities for workers. Its purpose was to reward the hardest workers and boost morale. The KDF offered subsidised holidays, cheap theatre tickets, and access to sporting events. One of its most ambitious projects was the Volkswagen Initiative, which aimed to help workers save for an affordable car. The Volkswagen, or People's Car. Workers could make monthly contributions towards purchasing the car. However, despite the enthusiasm, no one actually received a car, as the funds were ultimately redirected to the production of military weapons. The Beauty of Labour, or SDA. The Beauty of Labour programme focused on improving working conditions. It encouraged employers to enhance workplace environments by providing safety equipment, establishing low-cost canteens, and creating sport and leisure facilities. The SDA aimed to make workplaces more pleasant and safer for employees. While many employers implemented these improvements, they often did so by deducting the associated costs from employees' wages, which somewhat undermined the programme's benefits. Extent of success. Although the Nazis reduced unemployment, workers lost many rights. Trade unions were banned, workers needed government permission to quit their jobs, and they lost the right to strike. There was also no maximum limit on working hours. While Strength Through Joy provided some free trips and cinema tickets, most holidays remained too expensive for the average worker. In summary, the Nazis reduced unemployment from 6 million to under 1 million by 1939 through public works projects, rearmament, conscription, and the National Labour Service. The Nazis aimed to make Germany self-sufficient through the New Plan and the 4-Year Plan, developing alternatives to imported materials in preparation for war. official statistics excluded groups like women, Jewish people, RAD workers and prisoners, which masked the true unemployment rate. Wages increased, but so did the cost of living, and weekly work hours grew, meaning that higher employment did not always improve the quality of life. The German Labour Front replaced unions and controlled worker rights, while programmes like Strength Through Joy offered leisure activities but fell short of big promises. While the Nazis reduced unemployment, workers lost key rights, such as the ability to strike, making many gains unsustainable. The persecution of minorities. In this video, we are looking at Nazi racial beliefs, the persecution of minority groups, and the persecution of Jewish people. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge that the content of this video covers a deeply upsetting and sensitive topic. It will be covering the views and actions of the Nazi regime, which were rooted in racism, discrimination, and prejudice. These views are completely unacceptable by today's standards, but they're essential to the policies and atrocities carried out under Nazi rule, the knowledge and understanding of which form an essential part of your GCSE history exam specification. If you find the content of this video upsetting, please take a moment to pause or speak to a trusted adult or teacher. Nazi racial beliefs. The Nazis held strong beliefs about race, thinking that humans were divided into different races, with some being superior to others. They believed that Germans belonged to a master race called Aryans, who were typically described as having blonde hair, blue eyes, and being tall and athletic. The Nazis felt that Aryans had the right to rule over other races, which they considered inferior. Among those that they deemed inferior were Jewish people, Slavs, Roma, Sinti, homosexuals, and black people. The Nazis saw these groups as subhuman or untermenschen, and believed they did not deserve to live. They created policies to make Germany as Aryan as possible, ideas that Hitler detailed in his book Mein Kampf. The Nazis also labelled anyone who did not fit their Aryan ideal as undesirable. This included people from the inferior racial groups, as well as homosexuals, criminals, prostitutes, Jehovah's Witnesses, political opponents, pacifists, and homeless people. They believed that Germany would be better without these individuals. Additionally, the Nazis thought that people with physical or learning disabilities harmed the purity of the German race. This belief was connected to eugenics, a concept that aimed to improve the human race by preventing those they considered undesirable from having children. Persecution of minority groups. Slavs. The Nazi persecution of Slavs was rooted in their racist ideology, which viewed Slavs as inferior people. Slavs are an ethnic group that originally migrated into Europe from the East and are largely found in Eastern Europe, including countries like Poland, Russia, and Ukraine. Nazi propaganda depicted Slavs as subhuman and portrayed them as a significant threat to the Aryan race. Under Nazi rule, Slavs faced severe discrimination and persecution. In Poland, for example, the Nazis implemented policies to eliminate the Polish intelligentsia, leaders, and anyone who could resist their occupation. Many Polish people were sent to concentration camps and entire villages were destroyed. The Nazis also planned to remove millions of Slavs from their land to make room for German settlers in what they called Lebensraum, or living space. In the Soviet Union, the Nazis carried out brutal campaigns during their invasion, known as Operation Barbarossa. Millions of Soviet soldiers and civilians, many of whom were Slavs, were killed or captured. the Nazis also deliberately starved populations, such as during the siege of Leningrad, leading to the deaths of countless civilians. Roma and Sinti people. In the 1930s, there were about 30,000 Roma and Sinti people, referred to as gypsies by the Nazis, living in Germany. The Nazis also viewed Roma and Sinti people as racially inferior and believed they posed a danger to the purity of the Aryan race. In 1935, they enacted laws that banned marriage between Roma and Sinti people and Germans, similar to laws that also targeted Jewish people. In 1938, the persecution intensified. The Nazis passed a law known as the Struggle Against the Gypsy Plague, which forced Roma and Sinti people to register with the state. This registration made it easier for the Nazis to identify, track, and target them for further persecution. From 1938 onwards, many Roma and Sinti people were sent to concentration camps. In these camps, they faced inhumane conditions, forced labour, and many were killed. The Nazis also carried out mass deportations of Roma and Sinti people from Germany and other occupied territories to extermination camps like Auschwitz, where thousands were murdered. Homosexuals. The Nazi persecution of homosexuals was based on their belief that gay men lowered moral standards and spoiled the purity of the German race. In 1935, the Nazis strengthened the laws against homosexuality. These laws made it easier to arrest and imprison men suspected of being homosexual. As a result, the number of men imprisoned for homosexuality increased dramatically. In 1934, nearly 800 men were imprisoned, but by 1938, this number had risen to 8,000. Many of these men were sent to concentration camps, where they faced brutal treatment, forced labour, and often death. In the camps, homosexual prisoners were identified by a pink triangle on their uniforms. They were subjected to particularly harsh conditions and were often isolated from other prisoners. Black people. In 1935, the Nazis passed laws that banned marriage between black people and Aryans. These laws were similar to those targeting other groups, such as Jewish people and Roma and Sinti people, and were intended to prevent racial mixing and maintain the so-called purity of the Aryan race. Black people in Nazi Germany faced severe discrimination and were often subjected to racial slurs and violence. They were excluded from many aspects of public life, including education and employment opportunities. During the 1936 Berlin Olympics, black athletes like Jesse Owens, who won 4 gold medals, faced significant racism from the Nazi regime. Despite Owens' remarkable achievements, the Nazis tried to downplay his success because it contradicted their belief in Aryan superiority. In addition to discrimination and social exclusion, black people were also targeted for sterilisation. The Nazis believed that preventing black people from having children would help maintain the racial purity of the Aryan race. People with disabilities. The Nazis considered people with disabilities to be a burden on society and sought to eliminate what they saw as genetic weaknesses. In 1933, the Nazis passed the sterilisation law, officially called the Law for Prevention of Hereditarily Diseased Offspring. This law allowed the Nazis to forcibly sterilise people with hereditary illnesses, as well as those with physical or learning disabilities. It is believed that up to 700,000 people were sterilised under this law, preventing them from having children. In 1939, the Nazis escalated their persecution with the introduction of the T4 programme. They ordered that babies with severe disabilities should be killed by a lethal drug overdose. This programme was later expanded to include children up to 17 years old. The T4 programme marked the beginning of a systematic effort to kill people with disabilities. Initially, the Nazis sterilised people with mental illnesses, but from 1939 they began to put these individuals to death instead. This continued until 1941, when public protests forced the Nazis to officially stop the T4 programme. However, it is estimated that over 70,000 people with disabilities were killed as a result. Persecution of Jewish people. Origins of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, or hatred towards Jewish people, has deep roots in European history, dating back many centuries. This prejudice existed long before the Nazis came to power in Germany. Anti-Semitism began in ancient times. During the Roman Empire, Jewish people were blamed for the death of Jesus Christ, which led to centuries of mistrust and hostility towards them from Christians. This blame was one of the earliest forms of anti-Semitism. In the Middle Ages, anti-Semitism grew as Jewish people were often associated with wealth and power. Christians were forbidden by their religion to lend money with interest, a practice known as usury, but Jewish people could engage in this activity. As a result, Jewish people became prominent moneylenders, leading to further resentment and stereotypes about their supposed wealth and power. Jewish people were persecuted in nearly all European countries. For instance, in 1290, during the reign of King Edward I, all Jewish people were expelled from England and were not allowed to return for over 350 years. Similar expulsions and persecution occurred in other parts of Europe. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, violent attacks against Jewish communities, known as pogroms, took place in Russia. These pogroms involved looting, destruction of property and murder, further fueling anti-Semitic sentiments. During this period, conspiracy theories about Jewish people also emerged. Some believed in the false idea that Jewish people were plotting to take over the world. These baseless theories contributed to widespread fear and hatred. By the early 20th century, anti-Semitism was widespread across Europe, including in Germany. Jewish people faced discrimination in many aspects of life, including employment, education, and social integration. This deep-rooted anti-Semitism set the stage for the extreme policies and actions of the Nazi regime when they rose to power in 1933. Timeline of persecution, 1933 to 1939. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, there were about 500,000 Jewish people in Germany, making up about 1% of the population. Hitler and the Nazi regime used Jewish people as scapegoats for Germany's problems, including its defeat in the First World War. Through extensive propaganda, the Nazis portrayed Jewish people as evil and corrupt, fostering widespread hatred and discrimination. Between 1933 and 1939, the Nazis passed numerous laws aimed at driving Jewish people out of Germany. By 1941, nearly 80% of the Jewish population had left the country due to these oppressive measures. March 1933. Jewish lawyers and judges were dismissed from their positions. This was part of the broader Law for the Restoration of the Professional Civil Service, which aimed to remove all non-Aryans from public service roles. April 1933. Jewish people were banned from joining any sports clubs, preventing them from participating in public athletic activities. All Jewish teachers were fired from public schools, cutting off their ability to educate and earn a living. A nationwide boycott of Jewish shops and businesses was enforced by SA members who stood outside these establishments, intimidating potential customers and preventing them from entering. September 1933. Race studies were introduced in German schools to indoctrinate students with Nazi racial ideology, teaching them that Jewish people and other minorities were inferior to the Aryan race. January 1934. Jewish shops were marked with a yellow Star of David, or the word Judah, making them easily identifiable and subject to further boycotts and attacks. September 1935. Nuremberg Laws. These laws had two key parts. The Reich Law for the protection of German blood and honour. This law banned marriages and sexual relations between Jewish people and non-Jewish people, aiming to prevent racial mixing and preserve Aryan purity. The Reich Law on Citizenship. This law stripped Jewish people of their German citizenship, making them stateless and removing their legal rights. Jewish people were also required to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing for identification. They were banned from public places like parks, cinemas and restaurants, further isolating them from society. January 1936. Jewish people were forbidden from owning electrical equipment, bicycles, typewriters or music records. This law aimed to impoverish and further marginalise Jewish families. January 1938. Jewish doctors were dismissed from their jobs, preventing them from practising medicine and serving the community. November 1938. Kristallnacht. This violent pogrom occurred on the 9th to the 10th of November. On the 7th of November, a German official in Paris was killed by a Jewish man. The Nazis used this event as a pretext to launch a campaign of terror against Jewish people, although they presented it as a spontaneous reaction by the German public. During Kristallnacht, around 800 Jewish shops were destroyed, 200 synagogues were vandalised, nearly 100 Jewish people were killed, and 20,000 were sent to concentration camps. Jewish people were blamed for the violence and were ordered to pay 1 billion marks for the damages. Also in 1938, Jewish children were banned from playing with non-Jewish children, further isolating them and preventing them from forming friendships. Jewish people were banned from using public swimming pools, another measure to segregate them from the rest of the population. 1939. The Reich Office for Jewish Emigration was established under Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Gestapo, to accelerate the forced emigration of Jewish people from Germany, pushing them to leave the country under increasing pressure and persecution. April 1939. Jewish people could be evicted from their homes without any reason, leaving them vulnerable to displacement and homelessness. September 1939. Jewish people were restricted from leaving their homes between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., further limiting their freedom and ability to live normal lives. Grade 9 Knowledge. Kindertransport. Kindertransport, meaning children's transport, was a rescue mission that took place between 1938 and 1940. During this time, the British government allowed 10,000 Jewish refugee children from Nazi-occupied Europe to come to Britain. This effort aimed to save these children from the dangerous and oppressive conditions under Nazi rule. The Kindertransport began after Kristallnacht in November 1938, which made it clear that Jewish people were in grave danger under Nazi rule. The Kindertransport program meant that parents had to make the heart-wrenching decision to send their children away to safety without being able to accompany them. These children often carried just a small suitcase and a few personal belongings, travelling by train and boat to reach Britain. The journey was long and stressful, as children were separated from their families and sent to a foreign country where they often did not know the language. Once they arrived in Britain, the children were either placed with foster families or temporarily housed in camps until suitable foster families could be found. Many organisations and charities, including Jewish and Quaker groups, helped organise the transports and find homes for the children. Foster families provided them with a new home, and many British families opened their hearts to these young refugees, offering them a chance to live in safety and continue their education. Life in Britain varied for Kindertransport children. Some were warmly welcomed and integrated well into their new families and communities. Others faced challenges such as language barriers, cultural differences, and the emotional trauma of separation from their families. After the Second World War, many of the children who had come to Britain through the Kindertransport programme chose to stay and became British citizens. Others emigrated to countries like Israel, the USA, Canada or Australia to start new lives. Sadly, most of these children never saw their parents again, as many of their families were victims of the Holocaust. Impact of the war. When Germany invaded various countries during the Second World War, millions more Jewish people came under Nazi rule. These included 3 million Jewish people in Poland, 3 million in Russia, and 1 million in France, Denmark, Norway, and the Balkans. Ghettos. In several occupied countries, Jewish people were forced into ghettos, which were designated areas of cities surrounded by walls or barbed wire to isolate them from the rest of the population. Conditions in these ghettos were horrific, with extremely limited access to food, water, and medical supplies. The largest ghetto was in Warsaw, Poland, which initially held a population of 440,000 Jewish people in a small, cramped area. In the Warsaw ghetto, overcrowding was severe, with many families crammed into single rooms. Basic sanitation was almost non-existent, leading to the spread of diseases such as typhus and cholera. The Nazis deliberately provided insufficient food, leading to widespread malnutrition and starvation. Due to these dire conditions, thousands of people died each month. The lack of adequate shelter, coupled with harsh weather conditions, further exacerbated the suffering. Despite the brutal conditions, the inhabitants of the ghettos tried to maintain a sense of community, setting up schools, cultural activities, and underground resistant movements. Labour camps and execution squads. Jewish people were also forced to work in labour camps, where conditions were brutal and inhumane. Prisoners in these camps faced extremely harsh treatment, with inadequate food, water, and shelter. They were subjected to gruelling, back-breaking work for long hours with little rest. many died from overwork, starvation, disease, and exposure to the elements. The Einsatzgruppen, or mobile execution squads, accompanied the German army as it invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. These squads were tasked with exterminating Jewish people and other perceived enemies of the Nazi regime. The Einsatzgruppen operated behind the front lines, moving through the countryside to identify, round up, and execute Jewish people and others. They carried out mass shootings, often forcing victims to dig their own graves before being killed. In some cases, they used gas fans to suffocate their victims with carbon monoxide. By 1943, the Einsatzgruppen had killed an estimated 1.2 million people through these systematic and brutal methods. The final solution. Despite the massive scale of the killings, the Nazis were not satisfied with the pace of the destruction of Europe's Jewish population. Determined to speed up their genocidal campaign, leading Nazi officials began working on what they called the final solution to the Jewish question. This plan aimed to completely exterminate all Jewish people under Nazi control. In January 1942, a conference of high-ranking Nazi officials was held at Wannsee, a suburb of Berlin, to coordinate and implement this final solution. Although Hitler did not attend the Wannsee conference, his top officials, including Reinhard Heydrich and Adolf Eichmann, were present to outline the plan. The final solution detailed the systematic genocide of an estimated 11 million Jewish people across Europe. This plan included several methods of mass murder. Forced labour. Jewish people were to be worked to death in labour camps under extremely harsh conditions, with little food, water, and medical care. Poison gas. Gas chambers were used as an efficient method for mass killings in extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau. Victims were often told they were going to take showers, only to be locked in gas chambers and killed with poison gas, such as Cyclone B. Mass shootings. Execution squads like the Einsatzgruppen continued their operations, systematically shooting Jewish people in mass graves. Death camps. 6 large death camps were built by the Nazis, with the largest being Auschwitz-Birkenau in Poland. These camps were designed for the mass murder of people that the Nazis considered undesirable. Jewish people, along with Roma and Sinti people, homosexuals, political opponents, disabled people and others, were transported to these camps under horrific conditions. The persecution and systematic extermination of Jewish people during the Second World War is known as the Holocaust, or the Shoah in Hebrew. This horrific event involved the Nazis attempting to eliminate the entire Jewish population of Europe, resulting in the deaths of 6 million Jewish people. Out of the 6 million Jewish people murdered during the Holocaust, 3 million were killed in death camps. This genocide included approximately 90% of the Jewish population in Germany and Poland. Additionally, it is believed that 5 million non-Jewish people, including Roma and Sinti and people with disabilities, also perished in these camps. Upon arrival at the camps, people were subjected to a selection process. They were divided into 2 groups, those deemed fit enough to work and those who were not. Those who were not fit to work, including the elderly, young children and the sick, were immediately taken to gas chambers and killed. The Nazis built huge gas chambers disguised as showers to deceive the victims. Up to 2,000 people could be killed at a time in these chambers. After the victims were gassed, other prisoners were forced to remove the bodies. They took anything valuable, such as gold teeth or glasses, before burning the bodies in large ovens. Grade 9 knowledge. The origin and meaning of the word Holocaust. The word Holocaust comes from a Greek word which means a completely burnt sacrifice. In ancient times, it referred to a type of religious sacrifice where an animal was totally burned. Over time, the term has come to mean any large-scale destruction, especially by fire. Many Jewish people prefer to use the term Shoah instead of Holocaust. Shoah is a Hebrew word that means catastrophe or disaster. Unlike Holocaust, which has other historical and religious meanings, Shoah specifically refers to the genocide of Jewish people during the Second World War. The term Shoah is also more meaningful within the Jewish community, as it reflects their understanding and experience of this tragic period. Since Holocaust originally meant a burnt offering, some Jewish people feel that this term is inappropriate because it could mistakenly suggest that the genocide was a form of sacrifice, which does not accurately represent the horror of what happened. Attempt to cover up. As it became clear that Germany was going to lose the war, the Nazis tried to cover up their crimes. They destroyed records and dug up railway lines to hide evidence of the atrocities they had committed. They also dismantled and destroyed some of the concentration camps and death camps to erase any trace of the mass murders. Complicity. The execution of the final solution required the involvement of thousands of people. Railway workers coordinated the transportation of prisoners to concentration and death camps, while office clerks and telephone operators managed the logistics and administration. Police and soldiers enforced Nazi policies, capturing and deporting Jewish people and other targeted groups. Additionally, around 150 German companies profited from using prisoners from Auschwitz-Birkenau as slave labour to produce goods. Other firms even competed for contracts to build the gas chambers and crematoria used for mass killings, highlighting the widespread complicity in the genocide. To prevent negative reactions from the German public, the Nazis created propaganda films that depicted the camps as labour camps, where prisoners were well treated and conditions were humane. However, the true horrors of the camps were known to many within Germany and in other countries. Despite this knowledge, widespread opposition to the atrocities was rare. Many people in Germany did not speak out for several reasons. Some feared the severe consequences of opposing the Nazi regime, which could include imprisonment or death. Others were indifferent, either because they did not feel personally affected or because they chose to ignore the suffering. Additionally, intense Nazi propaganda and indoctrination led some to believe that the actions were justified as part of a necessary effort to protect and purify the Aryan race. Jewish resistance. Despite facing overwhelming odds and brutal oppression, Jewish people did resist the Nazis in various ways. These included secret places of worship. In some ghettos, Jewish people secretly organised places of worship and continued to practice their faith, even though the Nazis had banned such activities. These acts of spiritual resistance helped maintain a sense of community and hope in the face of extreme persecution. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. One of the most famous acts of resistance occurred in the Warsaw Ghetto. In 1943, a group of Jewish fighters organised an uprising against the Nazis. Despite being poorly armed and significantly outnumbered, they managed to hold off the German forces for 43 days. The resistance fighters used guerrilla tactics, building barricades and hiding in bunkers. Although the uprising was eventually crushed, it inspired other acts of resistance and demonstrated immense courage and defiance. The Treblinka Death Camp Revolt. Another significant act of resistance took place at the Treblinka Death Camp in 1943. A prisoner managed to access the camp's weapons store and distributed guns and grenades to fellow inmates. They set the camp on fire, killing 15 guards in the process. Approximately 150 prisoners escaped during the chaos, but many were recaptured and killed. Other forms of resistance. Apart from armed revolts, Jewish people also resisted in other ways. Some joined partisan groups that fought against the Nazis from the forests and countryside. Others engaged in acts of sabotage, such as damaging machinery or disrupting transport lines. Many also documented their experiences through diaries and underground newspapers, preserving the truth of what was happening despite the Nazis' efforts to hide their crimes. In summary, the Nazis believed in the superiority of an Aryan master race and saw other groups like Jewish people, Slavs and Roma as inferior or subhuman. Various groups were targeted for their race, beliefs or lifestyles. This included homosexuals, people with disabilities and black people. The Nazis passed discriminatory laws and sent many to concentration camps. The Nazis enacted laws to segregate and limit the freedoms of Jewish people, creating ghettos in occupied areas to control populations in harsh, overcrowded conditions. In 1942, Nazi leaders formalised the final solution to exterminate Jewish people. This plan included mass shootings, forced labour, and the use of gas chambers in extermination camps. This ultimately led to the deaths of 6 million Jewish people and millions of others. Despite severe oppression, some Jewish people resisted through uprisings, underground worship, and acts of sabotage. As Germany began losing the war, the Nazis tried to hide their crimes by destroying records and camps, but the genocide's impact was far-reaching and exposed post-war. The Second World War, 1939 to 45. In this video, we are looking at the impact of the conflict on Germany and the end of the Third Reich. At the start of the Second World War, Germany experienced a series of rapid military victories. In the spring of 1940, within just a few weeks, German forces defeated 6 European countries, including France, the Low Countries, Denmark, and Norway. Early in the war, many Germans believed in Nazi propaganda, which led to widespread enthusiasm for the war effort. However, as the war continued, the situation worsened. Disillusionment began to set in among the German population. In 1941, Germany launched an invasion of the Soviet Union. Although they made initial advances, the German army was unprepared for the severe Russian winter. The Soviet army launched a counterattack, gradually pushing the Germans back. This conflict resulted in massive losses for Germany, with over 2 million German soldiers killed. In December 1941, the United States entered the war on the side of the USSR and Britain, significantly strengthening the Allies. From this point, the tide of the war began to turn against Germany. By the beginning of 1944, it became clear that Germany would not win the war. Evacuation. At the outset of the war, the German government made plans to evacuate children from large towns and cities to safeguard them from the expected bombings. This large-scale evacuation began in earnest in 1942, as the Allied bombing campaign against Germany intensified, posing significant threats to urban areas. The evacuation was part of the Kinderlandversicherung program, which aimed to protect young people by relocating them to safer rural areas. Approximately 2.5 million children were evacuated under this program. The children were sent to specially established camps in the countryside. The camps were supervised by Hitler Youth leaders and teachers, ensuring that the children's education continued while they were away from home. The supervision also meant that the children were exposed to Nazi ideology, as the regime sought to maintain control over their upbringing and instill its beliefs. The KLV camps varied in conditions. Some were well organised with adequate facilities, while others were less comfortable and more basic. Despite the intention to keep the children safe, many faced the challenges of separation from their families and the harsh realities of living in wartime conditions. Rationing. During the war, Germany experienced severe food shortages because a significant portion of supplies needed to be sent to the soldiers on the front lines. To manage these shortages and ensure fair distribution, the German government introduced a strict rationing system that began in August 1939. Initially, rationing covered essential food items such as bread, meat, and dairy products. By November 1939, the rationing was extended to include clothing, making it increasingly difficult for people to obtain even basic necessities. The scarcity of goods extended beyond food and clothing. Everyday items like soap and toilet paper were hard to come by, which added to the daily struggles of the civilian population. Additionally, hot water was rationed and made available only 2 days per week, further complicating everyday life. In the early years of the war, Germany attempted to supplement its domestic supplies by shipping goods from occupied territories. Despite these efforts, the shortages remained severe. By May 1942, the rationing system became ever more stringent. Rations were cut significantly, with bread limited to half a loaf per person per day. Due to the harsh rationing measures, a black market developed where people could illegally purchase goods that were otherwise unavailable. However, the prices on the black market were hugely inflated, making these items accessible only to those who could afford to pay the high costs. Labour shortages. During the war, Germany implemented a policy known as total war to maximise its war effort and ensure the military had all the resources it needed. In 1942, Albert Speer was appointed as Armaments Minister and given the responsibility to reorganise the entire country to focus solely on war production. This drastic shift meant that all non-essential activities were halted and resources were redirected to support the military. Under Speer's direction, various non-essential establishments such as beer houses, theatres and other leisure facilities were closed. Even postal services were severely restricted to ensure that resources like manpower and materials were fully used for the war effort. Factories were ordered to increase their production of weapons, ammunition and other war materials, but they faced significant challenges due to a severe shortage of male labourers, many of whom were serving on the front lines. To tackle this labour shortage, the German government ordered that women enter the workforce. Starting in January 1943, all men aged 16 to 65 and all women aged 17 to 45 were required to register as available for work. This mobilisation effort brought a significant number of women into factories, taking on roles that were previously held by men. By August 1944, further measures were introduced to boost productivity. A ban on holidays for workers was implemented, and the standard working week was extended to 60 hours. Despite these rigorous measures, the demand for labour continued to surpass the supply. To address this gap, Germany increasingly relied on foreign labour. By 1944, approximately 7 million foreign workers had been brought into Germany, many of whom were forced into slave labour. These workers were compelled to work under harsh conditions in factories, on farms, and in other critical industries that supported the war effort. The use of foreign slave labour became a vital part of Germany's strategy to maintain its war production levels. Bombing. The Allied bombing campaigns against Germany during the war had a significant impact on the country. The British Royal Air Force began bombing German cities in August 1940. Initially, the focus was on military and industrial targets. However, from 1942, both Britain and the United States intensified their efforts to bomb German cities, aiming to undermine civilian morale and weaken the Nazi war effort by causing widespread disruption and panic. Between March and July 1943, 43 German cities were heavily bombed. These bombings caused substantial interruptions to essential services, such as electricity and water supplies, severely damaged transportation networks, and resulted in widespread destruction of homes and infrastructure. The relentless bombings created a massive refugee crisis, as countless people were forced to flee the destruction in search of safety. The human cost was staggering, with an estimated over 600,000 civilians losing their lives due to the bombings. The scale of the devastation necessitated the creation of welfare organisations to address the immediate needs of the affected population. These organisations worked to provide food, drink, and temporary shelter for those who had lost their homes. From 1944 onwards, the Allied bombing strategy shifted focus once again to target key infrastructure and industrial sites essential to Germany's war effort. The aim was to cripple Germany's ability to produce war materials and sustain its military operations. Notable targets included the Ruhr Valley, a major industrial region. The raids on the Ruhr Valley had a significant impact, with metal production in the area being reduced by around 40%. This substantial decrease in production capacity further weakened Germany's ability to continue fighting effectively. Changing role of women. The role of women in Germany changed considerably, influenced by the increasing demands of the war. Initially, Hitler and the Nazi regime were strongly opposed to women working, believing that a woman's place was in the home, dedicated to family and motherhood. In the early years of the war, Hitler upheld this opposition, encouraging women to focus on domestic duties and raising children. However, as the war progressed and the demands on the German economy and military resources intensified, it became clear that the country needed to use all available labour, including women. In 1942, under the policy of total war, it was mandated that all women aged 17 to 45 had to register for work. By mid-1943, an additional 500,000 women were employed in various industries. By 1945, women constituted 60% of the German workforce, taking on roles in factories, agriculture, and other sectors critical to the war effort. The war also brought significant psychological trauma to German women. They lived in constant fear of losing family members who were fighting on the front lines. the harsh realities of war included enduring severe shortages of food and other essentials due to strict rationing. Additionally, the fear and aftermath of Allied bombing raids added to their stress and anxiety, as cities were frequently targeted, resulting in widespread destruction, casualties, and the displacement of many families. As the Soviet army advanced from the east, the situation for German women became even more dire. Numerous reports emerged of brutalities committed by Soviet troops, including widespread rape and murder. It is estimated that millions of German women were subjected to sexual violence, with tens of thousands dying from these attacks or committing suicide to escape the horrors. The advancing Soviet troops often targeted women as a means of demoralising the civilian population and exacting revenge for the atrocities committed by the Nazis in the Soviet Union. End of the Third Reich. By 1945, the defeat of Germany was inevitable. Soviet forces were advancing relentlessly from the east, capturing city after city, while Allied forces pressed in from the west. Despite fierce resistance from German troops, the combined strength and resources of the Allies made Germany's collapse only a matter of time. As the Allies advanced, millions of German civilians became refugees, fleeing the cities to escape the relentless bombing and approaching Soviet forces. Conditions for these refugees were dire. Up to 1 million civilians died from hunger, disease, and the cold as they tried to find safety amidst the chaos. On the 30th of April 1945, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker in Berlin, realising that his regime was doomed. Before his death, he named Admiral Karl Dönitz as its successor to lead what remained of the German government. Dönitz attempted to negotiate a more favourable surrender for Germany, but the Allies insisted on unconditional surrender. On the 7th of May 1945, Admiral Dönitz officially surrendered to the Allied forces, bringing an end to the Second World War in Europe. The surrender was formalised the next day, the 8th of May 1945, which is celebrated as VE Day. This marked the end of the Third Reich, which had caused immense destruction and loss of life across Europe. The aftermath of the war saw Germany in ruins, with its cities destroyed, its economy shattered, and its people facing severe hardships. The Allied forces began the task of reconstructing Europe and bringing Nazi war criminals to justice through the Nuremberg trials. In summary, Germany achieved rapid victories at the start of the war, defeating 6 European countries in 1940. Nazi propaganda created widespread enthusiasm for the war effort. The invasion of the USSR in 1941 faltered due to the harsh winter and Soviet counterattacks. The USA entered the war in December 1941, strengthening the Allies and turning the tide against Germany. The KLV programme evacuated 2.5 million children to rural camps during Allied bombings. Strict rationing of food, clothing and essentials created severe hardships for civilians. Labour shortages led to policies mobilising women and using foreign workers, including slave labour, to sustain war production. By 1944, the workforce included 7 million foreign labourers. Allied bombing intensified from 1942, targeting cities and key industries, causing massive destruction, loss of civilian lives, and a refugee crisis. Germany faced inevitable defeat in 1945, with the Allies advancing from both the east and west. Hitler committed suicide on the 30th of April 1945, and Germany surrendered on the 8th of May 1945. GCSE History, Germany. Opposition to the Nazis. In this video, we are looking at support for the Nazi regime, opposition from the churches and the young, and political opposition. Support for the Nazi regime. The Nazi regime enjoyed significant support in Germany. In the July 1932 Reichstag elections, the Nazis won 38% of the votes, making them the largest party in the Reichstag. This result was complemented by Hitler receiving 36% of the vote in the April 1932 presidential election, highlighting his popularity with the German people. From 1933 onwards, conformity with Nazi policies was widespread across Germany. This conformity was driven by several factors. One major factor was the extensive use of censorship and propaganda by the Nazi regime. The Nazis controlled the media, ensuring that only positive information about the regime was spread while silencing any dissenting views. Additionally, the regime's successes, particularly in reducing unemployment and stabilising the economy, earned them substantial support. Despite this high level of support, there was some opposition to the Nazis, though it was difficult to measure due to the fear of severe consequences. The regime banned official opposition from other political parties and trade unions, making organised resistance nearly impossible. The Gestapo ruthlessly pursued and eliminated perceived threats to the regime, creating an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. However, opposition did exist in the form of everyday resistance. Many Germans expressed their dissatisfaction privately, through grumbling or moaning about the regime. Anti-Nazi jokes circulated quietly, serving as a form of subtle rebellion. Some workers showed their discontent through absenteeism, avoiding work as a form of protest. The black market thrived as people engaged in illegal buying and selling of goods to avoid the strict controls imposed by the regime. Additionally, some individuals resisted by failing to report others who were opposing the regime, choosing instead to protect them. As the Second World War progressed, opposition to the Nazis grew. The hardships of the war, coupled with the advancing Allied forces, led to increased acts of sabotage against Nazi defence measures. Resistance groups such as the White Rose and the July bomb plot conspirators took bolder steps in their attempts to undermine the regime. However, it is important to note that despite these efforts, most Germans remained loyal to the government until the very end of the war. The powerful grip of Nazi propaganda, the fear of brutal reprisals, and the hope for a German victory kept the majority of the population in line. Opposition from the churches. Catholic Church. The Nazi regime had a complicated relationship with the Catholic Church. Initially, the Concordat between Hitler and the Pope in 1933 protected the rights of the Catholic Church in Germany, requiring Catholic bishops to swear allegiance to the regime. Despite this agreement, the Nazis gradually undermined the Church's autonomy, notably by closing Catholic schools to eliminate potential opposition and ensure the education system aligned with Nazi ideology. In response to these oppressive actions, some Catholic priests courageously spoke out against the Nazi regime. They condemned the Nazis' policies and actions, particularly their treatment of Jewish people and other persecuted groups. This outspoken opposition came at a great personal risk. The Nazi authorities were ruthless in their response to any dissent, and many priests who dared to speak out were arrested and imprisoned. Around 400 Catholic priests were sent to the priests' block at Dachau concentration camp. Dachau was one of the first concentration camps established by the Nazis, and it became a place where many political prisoners and opponents of the regime were detained. The imprisonment of these priests highlighted the severe consequences faced by those who resisted the Nazis, even within the religious community. Protestant Church. The Nazi regime sought to control Protestant churches in Germany by establishing the Reich Church in 1936. This state-controlled church was made up of Protestant churches that were willing to align themselves with Nazi ideology and cooperate with the regime. However, not all Protestant leaders were willing to accept this. In 1933, a group of Protestant pastors, including Martin Niemöller, established the Pastors' Emergency League in direct opposition to the Nazi plans. The PEL opposed the Nazis' attempts to merge regional churches into one national church. They also resisted Nazi efforts to prevent Jewish people from converting to Christianity and to ban the Old Testament from Christian teaching, as these actions were seen as direct attacks on their religious beliefs and practices. By 1934, the PEL had evolved into the Confessing Church, a more organised and determined movement against Nazi interference in church affairs. The Confessing Church declared that they would only follow the teachings of the Bible and not the orders of the state. It quickly gathered significant support, with 6,000 pastors joining its ranks, compared to the 2,000 who remained with the Reich Church. Members of the Confessing Church were outspoken in their opposition to the Nazi regime. They delivered sermons, wrote pamphlets, and openly criticised the Nazis' policies, particularly those related to racial purity and anti-Semitism. This bravery came at a high cost. The Nazis responded harshly, arresting many of these pastors. around 800 pastors from the Confessing Church were sent to concentration camps, where they faced brutal treatment. Key individual: Martin Niemöller. Martin Niemöller was a key figure in the Protestant opposition to the Nazi regime. Niemöller originally had a military career and served as a German U-boat commander during the First World War. After the war, he decided to become a pastor and was ordained in 1920. In the early 1930s, Niemöller supported the Nazi Party. He voted for them and welcomed Hitler's appointment as Chancellor in 1933, believing that Germany needed a strong leader to restore order. However, he soon became critical of the Nazis as he saw them trying to control the Protestant churches. As a founder of the Pastors' Emergency League and the Confessing Church, Niemöller spoke out against the Nazis, especially their racial laws and persecution of Jewish people. His outspoken criticism led to his arrest by the Gestapo in 1937. He was found guilty of opposing the state and was imprisoned in Sachsenhausen concentration camp, later transferred to Dachau, where he stayed until the end of the war in 1945. Limited opposition. Although many church leaders did speak out against the Nazis, overall opposition was limited. Those who did oppose the regime tended to focus on Nazi interference in church practices rather than opposing Nazism itself. They were primarily concerned with maintaining the independence of the church and preserving its teachings. Few Christians openly opposed the Nazis on broader issues, although attendance at church services remained high throughout the Nazi period. This indicates that while there was some resistance, it was often constrained by fear and focused more on religious autonomy than on confronting the Nazi regime directly. Opposition from the young. After 1933, some young people opposed the official Nazi youth groups and social policies. This resistance led to the formation of alternative youth groups, which provided an outlet for those who were dissatisfied with the strict discipline and lack of freedom imposed by the Nazis. The Edelweiss Pirates. The Edelweiss Pirates emerged in the late 1930s in the Rhineland and eventually spread to working-class areas of German cities. They were named after the white Edelweiss flower, which became their symbol. This group included both boys and girls who resented the authoritarian control and restrictions on their freedom. They expressed their rebellion by adopting American fashions, with boys often wearing their hair long. The Edelweiss Pirates frequently taunted members of the Hitler Youth and organised long hikes in the countryside to escape Nazi oversight. During these outings, they parodied Hitler Youth songs and told jokes about Hitler, openly mocking the regime. The Swing Youth. The Swing Youth consisted mainly of teenagers from wealthy middle-class families in large cities. They were enthusiasts of British and American culture, embracing contemporary fashion, films and music. They played records illegally imported from the United States, drank alcohol, smoked, and danced to the jitterbug and other popular styles. These youths organised illegal dances that could attract up to 6,000 participants. Many swing youth members preferred jazz music, popularised by black musicians like Louis Armstrong. The Nazis considered this music degenerate due to their racist beliefs. Limited opposition before 1939. Until 1939, youth opposition was relatively limited. It mostly involved minor acts of defiance, such as telling jokes about the Nazis, mocking the Hitler Youth, and painting anti-Nazi graffiti. This opposition was largely social rather than political, and the number of young people involved was relatively small. For example, there were about 2,000 members of the Edelweiss Pirates, compared to 8 million in the Hitler Youth. Impact of the war. As the war progressed, youth opposition became more serious and widespread. The Edelweiss Pirates, for instance, began to take more direct action against the Nazi regime. They provided shelter to army deserters and escaped prisoners from concentration camps, sabotaged trains carrying ammunition, stole food and supplies, and passed on military information to foreign countries. Their activities demonstrated a significant escalation in resistance efforts. The White Rose Group. The White Rose Group was another notable youth opposition movement founded by siblings Hans and Sophie Scholl. Most members were students at Munich University. The group openly criticised the persecution of Jewish people and Slavs and campaigned against the war. Between 1942 and 1943, They published and distributed 6 leaflets that condemned Nazi policies and actions. They also painted anti-Nazi slogans on buildings. The Gestapo arrested the group after Sophie Scholl was seen throwing anti-Nazi leaflets from a balcony to students below. Hans and Sophie Scholl, along with other members, were found guilty of treason and executed by guillotine just 4 days after their arrest. Political opposition. Political opposition to the Nazis came from various groups, despite the dangers they faced under the regime. 2 of the main sources of political resistance were the Communist Party and the Social Democratic Party. The Communist Party, or KPD. The KPD continued to encourage workers to resist the Nazi regime, even after the party was banned in 1933. The Nazis viewed communists as one of their biggest enemies, and the KPD operated in secret to avoid detection. When the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the KPD intensified its efforts. They established over 100 secret cells across Germany to organise and promote resistance activities. These cells distributed anti-Nazi leaflets, organised strikes, and tried to sabotage Nazi operations. However, the Gestapo infiltrated many communist cells. Due to this, the KPD's activities were severely hindered, and they never posed a serious threat to the Nazi regime. The Social Democratic Party, or SPD. The SPD, another major political opponent of the Nazis, also faced severe repression. After the SPD was banned, its leaders fled Germany to avoid arrest. They set up SOPAID, the SPD abroad, to continue their campaign against the Nazis from outside the country. SOPAID worked to inform the world about the realities of life under Nazi rule and to rally international opposition. They published reports and leaflets, hoping to inspire both internal and external resistance to the Nazis. Despite their efforts, operating from abroad limited their direct impact within Germany. Unlike the KPD, they struggled to pose a significant threat to the regime. Opposition from the army. Some army officers actively opposed the Nazis, despite the considerable risks involved. A notable figure in this opposition was General Ludwig Beck, who was the Chief of Staff of the German Army. Beck was deeply concerned about Hitler's aggressive policies and the potential consequences for Germany. He tried to persuade fellow officers to arrest Hitler, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Nevertheless, Beck continued to resist the regime and remained committed to overthrowing Hitler. In the early 1940s, Beck became involved in several plots to kill Hitler. He played a key role in conspiracies in both 1943 and 1944. The most famous of these attempts was the July bomb plot of 1944, which Beck orchestrated alongside Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg and a politician, Dr. Karl Goerdeler. The plan was that after Hitler's death, Goerdeler would become Chancellor and a new government would be established. On the 20th of July 1944, von Stauffenberg carried out the plan by bringing a bomb in a briefcase into a meeting at Hitler's military headquarters in East Prussia, known as the Wolf's Lair. He placed the briefcase under the table near Hitler and then left the meeting, under the pretense of taking a phone call. Unfortunately, just before the bomb detonated, the briefcase was moved to the other side of a sturdy table leg, which absorbed much of the blast. As a result, Hitler was only slightly wounded instead of being killed. The failure of the assassination attempt led to chaos and the swift unravelling of the conspirators' plans. They were unable to seize control of key locations in Berlin as intended. General Beck was given the option to commit suicide, but only managed to wound himself and was subsequently shot by a soldier. Von Stauffenberg and several other key conspirators were quickly arrested and executed by firing squad. Goerdeler went into hiding, but was eventually captured and hanged. In the aftermath of the plot, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, led a brutal crackdown on those involved and anyone suspected of disloyalty. Approximately 7,000 people were arrested and around 6,000 were executed, including many high-ranking officers and officials. In summary, the Nazis had widespread support, but used propaganda, censorship and fear to suppress organised opposition. Catholic priests and Protestant groups like the Confessing Church opposed Nazi interference, with many leaders arrested and sent to concentration camps. Groups like the Edelweiss Pirates and White Rose opposed Nazi policies, mocking Hitler Youth and engaging in sabotage. The KPD and SPD resisted secretly, distributing leaflets and promoting anti-Nazi efforts, but faced severe repression. Some army officers, like those in the July bomb plot of 1944, attempted to assassinate Hitler, but failed, leading to mass executions. Hardships during the Second World War increased opposition, with sabotage and resistance growing, though most Germans remained loyal due to fear and propaganda.